Welcome to Pick Me Up, I'm Scared, the podcast.
I'm your host, Madeline.
I'm your co-host, David.
And today we have a controversial topic.
Is it controversial?
It's
Actually,
controversial.
okay. You know what I've been thinking about? I just bought that, like, for the longest time I've wanted to read it, and it's not been available at the library, so I bought the fucking book.
What is it?
Techno-Orientalism.
Oh.
Because I've been thinking a lot about...
How China pilled I am?
Well, just how China-pilled everyone is.
I mean, hey, it's
The
it's
fucking...
the age of China.
Yeah, I mean...
We're coming up China.
We're coming up China. And, like, I'm all for that. I think
Yes,
that's fucking
Xi
fantastic.
Jinping, come save us. Give us high-speed rails.
You're ping-pilled.
I'm so ping-pilled, baby.
But I've been thinking a lot about the ways in which sometimes I get a little uncomfortable by the way...
I am so...
No. You're fine.
I'm fine.
But, like, other people...
You think there are people more China-pilled than me?
Well, no, but, like, when they go to... What's the like, techno city where it's like, I'm on the 31st floor. I'm on the...
yeah.
Like, and the...
Is it Chongqing?
Chongqing, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah. It is a beautiful city.
It's
It
not-
looks like a video game.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I have... But that is some fucking techno-orientalist sort of...
Yes,
Yeah,
it totally.
Like, it
They're
feels...
like, why do people sleep on China? It's just as cool as Japan. And you're like, that's weird. This is getting weird.
No, it's weird, but like it was just like what. So I'm just starting the fucking book. So that's Moses and Monotheism. That's my bus reading.
Yeah, you brought Sigmund Freud to my house. You're just casually reading Sigmund Freud on the bus.
Dude, okay. Here's the thing. This is in the way of chit chat. Before we record, I always say, should we chit chat?
Yeah, and I usually say yes.
Yeah.
Unless I'm like, we got a lot to get through.
Yeah.
Or the horrors abound and I have no capacity for chit chat.
Okay, but so Freud's speculative histories.
Oh my God, this is not chit chat, David.
No, this is
a lesson plan.
No, what I'm saying is that Freud's speculative histories read like spy novels or like mystery novels.
I mean, I could see that for him. He's
like,
fantastical.
Yeah. I'm just saying, because I just reread In the Freud Archives, which is like a fantastic nonfiction fucking thing by Janet Malcolm. I highly recommend everyone should fucking read everything Janet Malcolm has ever written, including her fabulous fucking profile of Eileen Fisher.
Oh, interesting.
Which is fucking fantastic. But his so Future of an Illusion, Totem and Taboo, Moses and Monotheism, and the Civilization book that I can't remember the fucking title now.
I don't know. That's all you. This is your world of interest. So you brought over Moses in Monotheism,
which is okay. So first of all, this is actually relevant to current events. So
I doubt it.
I promise you it is. In the preface, so I just reread Totem and Taboo, and in the preface to the Hebrew edition,
okay,
he has this like weird apologia where he's sort of like, hey, so it's weird that my book is being published in Hebrew. I am a Jew. I do not agree with the nationalist project about
you are correct. I stand corrected. That is topical.
Okay. And I am not a religiously practicing Jew, and yet I still feel myself everything that when the preface was being written, which was around the time of the founding of Israel.
Yes, like 1948.
I think it's a little before that, but like it's like in the process.
Post World War II, pre-Nakba. I guess the Nakba started in 1945. It started the year World War II ended, right?
So it's like around then. He's essentially like, hey, so I'm like not a practicing Jew. I did have to flee Austria for England. I am not. I like this national project. I want no part of. And yet I feel myself to be a Jew in this like really fundamental way. And so like Totem and Taboo, and I think especially Moses and Monotheism, which is sort of like a kind of speculative history of the Moses story.
Yes.
In which Moses is Egyptian.
Okay.
Is like a really interesting sort of, I think, debate that Freud is having with himself over the meaning of his like ethnic and cultural heritage.
Interesting.
Just saying. We were talking about...
Fork's trying to eat the book right now.
You know what, Fork? You did eat my Smiley's People.
What's Smiley's People?
It's a John le Carré novel.
She ate a book?
When I was staying here,
She's climbing on the table next to the microphone. Fork, come on, Forky. What are you doing here?
I will say what she did was she ate like the last 20 pages of it, which for a spy novel is like real fucked up, man.
I mean, she doesn't eat things really when I'm home.
I walked in and I just like saw like confetti
Oh my god,
all over your fucking floor.
She really pushes it when I'm not here. She really pushes the boundaries.
But so techno-orientalism, I've been thinking a lot about the ways in which how China pilled everyone is, which is really cool because like we all want healthcare and like
and a 90% home ownership rate and to eradicate extreme poverty and have high-speed trains.
But the way sometimes when I see people talk about it, I'm like, this is getting weird, guys.
It gets a little weird. It gets a little weird. Well, I got canceled twice this week, and one of them was for being a dengist.
Are you a fucking dengist?
I'm not a dengist. I'm not a dengist. My only take on deng is, wow, I used to really talk shit about these dengist reforms, but it turns out whatever they're doing in China is way better than anything I could do. Maybe I'm not as qualified to lead a country.
I mean, I think, right, like, I'm just going to say, right, like, this is, I think, one thing that if you are a person who likes Marx, as, like, if Marx is, like, sort of, like, epistemological basis by which you understand or read the world, right, you do have to continue with the Marx project. Like, you can't just be like, well, we're all lace weavers in 19th century England.
You gotta modernize. You gotta modernize with it. Yeah. So,
and like Dengist China is like a specific response to a specific set of material conditions on the sort of global geopolitical stage.
Yes.
And
it was effective. I think we all can agree it served a purpose and was effective. So I got canceled by a bunch of teenage Maoists and anarchists, as per usual.
Oh, that's the other thing.
Dengist.
Well, okay, so this is the other thing. I was promised Maoists the last time you and I saw each other.
Oh, yeah.
And we got no Maoists.
We got no Maoists.
What the fuck, man?
Yeah, we got no Maoists. We went to a Marxist event, and we actually heard this really funny story. They were like, oh, last time this event happened, because it was a Marxist-Leninist event, a group of Maoists showed up to protest it. But the Marxist-Leninists in LA, a group of them are in really tight with the Crips because they have a bookstore in a Crip-controlled neighborhood, but they do a bunch of like Marxist-Leninist projects in the tradition of the Black Panther. So they do like a bunch of free childcare for the community. They do a bunch of like job placement stuff. Like they let you use your computers to make resumes, and they watch your kids for you, and they give you groceries and like cleaning supplies and sanitary products. So all the Crips, I guess, really like this group of Marxist-Leninists in their neighborhood in LA. So a group of Maoists showed up to protest the Marxist-Leninists last year at an event, and I guess the Crips showed up to defend the Marxist-Leninists, and the Maoists were fighting with the Crips, being like, what do you know about revolution? And the Crips were like, I am going to kill you if you don't get out of our neighborhood. I'm like, whoa, this is the wildest story I've ever heard. I was not there for this firsthand, but people were like, yeah, it was weird.
This is,
this is a wild, this is the most LA story ever.
This is a very LA story. It's also, I feel like I will never identify with any specific type of Marx.
I used to not, but now I'm just leaning into the Leninism, even though
I just I read them all.
You know, I used to call myself a non-denominational Marxist, but the Marxist-Leninists get things done, and I like to get things done.
Fair enough. That's fair enough. I read them all.
Yes.
Speaking of
okay, so the teenage anarchists canceled me for being a dengist, which was funny. And the teenage Maoists and the teenage anarchists, and that was hilarious.
That's a weird alliance.
I mean, it really was. And I told them that they were like in a trifecta with a MAGA communist. I'm like, all my enemies are Maoists, anarchists, or MAGA communists. Judge me by them, because I don't know what's going on over there with those people. But so that was one. And then the second one is this guy who was like late to the party in consuming Madeline Pendleton disinformation law, but launched a full-scale multi-platform attack against me. I'm pretty sure his username was Dildo Baggins, which also makes this experience like that much funnier.
That is the most
Sure.
fucking...
I'm remembering it's Dildo Baggins, maybe. So
Shout out
he-
Dildo Baggins.
Shout
Sound
out.
off in the comments.
So he launched this full-scale campaign, which you'll appreciate as somebody who has known me since I was a sophomore in high school, convincing everybody that I grew up extremely wealthy and went to private schools and inherited multiple millions of dollars. And like all this like random stuff he made up about me being like super, super rich. Oh, and there's a group of people who think I'm a landlord because I helped Tori qualify to buy an apartment in New York.
Yeah, all of this.
I know, it's
I'm
so funny.
I'm
So
very
he
cool.
was like, I know it's so boring. So he was like late to the party on that. He's like, Madeline Pendleton owns a multiplex in New York City and is a multi-millionaire landlord who lives in a multi-million-dollar property in Los Angeles and went to private schools and grew up in a wealthy suburb outside of LA. And I was like, okay, this is really funny. And it wouldn't have been that big of a deal, except he was like you could tell this guy was really giving it his all. Like he was trying to do a thing. And it was like on Twitter, on TikTok. Like it was like multiple platforms. And
Do you
like,
think he got money?
no, he like like people tried to dox me basically. So they went into my financial records. So they found the mortgage documents, which are public, from me helping Tori get an apartment. Tori's my partner in New York, for those of you who don't know, off on again partner for 16 years. And I helped Tori get an apartment because they were in this really bad living situation and they were basically about to get evicted. So I was like, we should buy you an apartment, like, instead of renting. It's going to be the same price. And if you live in New York City, I'm just going to say there are so many good, like, low-cost options that you would not think. Same thing with San Francisco.
Mhm.
I never thought that I would ever be able to afford to buy something because I was very poor. But it turns out in San Francisco, it's usually easier to buy than to sign onto a new lease. In New York, it's like that too. There's a lot of very like cost-controlled co-ops. So if you're in New York and you think like, oh my God, rent's so expensive, I'm never going to be able to afford to move or whatever, it might be counterintuitive, but very often you can find things to buy cheaper than you can find things to rent. So he was telling Tori this, and Tori's like, yeah, but my credit score is like 2 because I have all this medical debt. And I was like, okay, I'll like help you because my credit score at the time was like 820 or something. And yeah, so that happened. So my name is on all these legal documents. So these people tried to like dox me. And what's funny is they didn't understand, like, I gave like a lecture at a queer housing summit in Fresno about like how to help your friends qualify to buy houses. Like, this is not something I was ever secretive about. But some people think they like discovered something. So this guy was even like a year late to that, and like I almost felt bad for him, but he's still been going. It's been like 48 hours. This guy like nonstop, relentlessly hitting it. He also thinks that like the clothing company that I work for is like fast fashion, and I'm like, sir, Dildo Baggins, sir, you are not qualified to assess what is fast fashion.
Okay,
You
I'm
don't
sorry.
even know what that means.
Dildo Baggins, contact me. I would love, because remember when I first moved to this town and I would like meet people and I'd be like, oh yeah, like the one person I know in this fucking town like runs a company or is whatever, is
Yeah.
part of a company. And they'd be like, what do they do? And I would be like, I don't know. I think they sell hot pants that say slut on the ass.
Yes.
Do you remember?
I do remember that
Yeah.
program, which we've never sold that product.
I do think,
But it's, not a hard no.
I think spiritually, at the time that I moved, because you were selling hot pants.
It was very Tumblr. That's a very Tumblr idea. Yeah, it's like
you were selling hot pants,
Uh-huh.
right?
Yeah.
And
Shorts. We sold shorts. David is so out of touch with fashion. He's calling shorts hot pants.
yes,
like your grandmother might. And
We're selling-
pushers in hot pants.
you were selling Daisy Dukes.
Yeah, right.
And
These are the kind of people, by the way, who are convinced that my job is fast fashion. They have no clue what fast fashion
Well,
means. They're just like, it's clothing that's trendy. It must be fast fashion. I'm like, okay.
yeah,
This is
it's
a
like,
term with a meaning, but
I've never been trendy. I've never been on trend.
okay, fast fashion has nothing to do with being on
No,
trend.
I don't.
You
I'm
have
not, Madeline. You don't have to
basics of fast
lecture
fashion.
me about your goddamn job.
Well, it's not my job. It's just
Yeah.
fast fashion in general. People misuse the term
Oh.
a lot.
I understand that, but you do sell hot pants with the word slut on them.
And that does not happen either.
That's all you sell, and the Stevie Nicks dresses.
Yes, and then, and you and I obviously met at an illustrious private school I attended.
I will say, this is the other thing. Dildo Baggins, get at me.
Yeah, David went to high school with me. He can tell you all about the
And I actually-
illustrious private school we attended.
And I went to a fucking private
You actually did go to a
I-
private school
I
before you
actually did,
transferred
yeah.
to the public school.
before I got
Do you-
booted from the...
Yeah, David got kicked out of a private school and then transferred to a public school, which a notoriously not so great public school is where we both went.
I mean,
where I went from the beginning. I was never in a private school, and that David transferred into.
But I do and I've told you this in the past when
Yeah.
I met you.
Yeah.
Because you, at the time, had the highest speed internet that I'd ever seen in my fucking life.
Yes.
Right. Like, I was like, this is my rich friend. Just because of the hot,
Yes.
like,
Yes. I mean, my mom and had married a new man, my stepdad, and together it was like a 2-income household,
yeah.
and they had like a house.
Yeah.
And it was like crazy. But I will say in Fresno our standards were a little low.
I
think our standards for
No,
financial
that was
stability were like real.
like I was like I'm operating at 14 kilowatts
Yeah,
per
yeah.
whatever
Yeah,
the
it's like-
fucking
The standards for being the wealthy friend in Fresno were like, you have internet access? There's
Yes.
sometimes food in your kitchen?
you can kazaa
Yes, you
you can kazaa full stop.
yes, yeah.
You can soul seek.
And to be clear, I was like, my mom just married a guy. I think we're rich.
Yeah.
So
You had a pool?
we had a pool. There was a pool at that house. That's like Fresno millionaire stuff.
No, I was like, this is my rich friend.
Yeah, it's like $100,000 house, but it doesn't matter. In Fresno,
I quickly
rich.
came to realize that was
yeah, and then it got kicked out of the house all the time, and then it was
That
like
was a fucking-
weird.
but,
yeah,
like-
it's bad. But you know,
But Dildo Baggins, I can spill the tea.
yeah, get it, David. David will give you a full rundown of our socioeconomic background,
I legitimately do not want anyone to ever contact me on the internet.
unless it is to talk about.
No, I don't give a shit about that. Dildo Baggins never fucking contact me.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
It
So
was
we're
important.
like China. We're talking. What are we talking about?
So, okay, we today are going to talk about a very controversial thing. It's so funny because there's some topics where I'm like, we can't talk about this because it's too controversial, even though it's the truth. People are too emotionally invested in it and they get like really weird about it. So, like the two things that have been like, oh, I can't talk about this because people aren't ready yet, have
Tibet.
been Ukraine. No, Tibet. That's
No, we
times
talked about it,
past.
and you were like, "What is Tibet a part of China or not?" And
And everybody is like, yes, but then there's like 12 people on the internet who get
Yeah.
really mad. We still to this day have bad reviews on Apple Podcasts from people who are like, this is Chinese propaganda about Tibet. And I'm just like, oh my God.
can the people on
Did-
the radio hear me rolling my eyes?
I think so.
Okay.
I think it's spiritually there. Yeah. So like, there are certain topics that feel too hot, too emotional. People have feelings about it. You can't discuss the actual facts of the matter. And the two things recently that have been like this have been Ukraine
Mm-hmm.
and the Uyghur genocide. I'm doing big air quotes around genocide for reasons you guys will come to understand.
Mm-hmm.
So both of these topics are very, very interesting because there is an abundance of information about these topics showing that the mainstream Western narrative is, surprise, surprise, not accurate. Big shocker, right? However, people are very emotionally invested in both of these topics. I mean, the Uyghur genocide thing, obviously, because who wants to be a genocide denier? That would be horrible.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to be that. And the Ukraine issue, because the position in Ukraine has been pitched to us like big, bad, evil Russia is invading poor, sweet, innocent Ukraine, and the United States is just showing up to be valiant and defend Ukraine because we care about white people.
I believe this is like a sort of like, as they say, Manichaean understanding of the world,
Yes.
right? Where it's like, because like it is like big bad Russia.
Big, bad Russia wants to hurt.
Well, no, I mean like in reality,
Oh, yeah.
it is big bad Russia.
You think in reality?
Right. That's.
I think it's just like a country. It's
Yeah.
just a place doing place things.
I think most countries are big bad.
You think most? Yeah, that's fine. I always say my take on Russia. Look, Russia hasn't been Marxist since 1991. Okay, I'm not a big
Mhm.
fan of current day Russia. I think of Russia as a broken clock that's right twice a day, and the 2 times it's right are always about Western imperialism.
No, sure. Right. Is like has invaded a country. That's fine. Like, what does that got to do with us?
Well, it actually has a lot to do with
No,
this.
I know. Yes, I know.
Yeah,
But,
we're
right,
not
and
going
why?
to do an episode about Ukraine, but it has a lot to do with this because the United States has literally, actually, yes, fostered neo-Nazi and far-right fascist right-wing extremism in Ukraine since the end of World War II. But you can't say that because Russia once said that. So if you say that, now you're repeating Kremlin propaganda, even though our own government admits we've been doing this.
No, I guess what I'm saying is maybe we should stop doing that.
Maybe we should stop
Fostering
neo-Nazi far-right. Yeah, one would think that might
like
be-
maybe we should not be involved in fucking Ukraine.
Yes,
That
that is
seems
the
like a normal fucking-
sensible. Yes, that is the sensible
doesn't-
political.
That is not like a
position.
pro-Putin position.
Well, apparently it is on the internet. I know. If you as an American talk about disliking what the United States has been doing with your tax dollars to foster far-right extremism in Ukraine, all of a sudden you are a big old Russia simp who loves Putin and was paid by the Kremlin. Okay, so it's one. Whatever. We'll probably do an episode on that.
We already have.
Have we?
We literally have done a Ukraine episode.
Did we really?
Yes, we did.
I don't know if that's accurate.
I believe we literally. It was like I think it was a NATO episode, but like
okay, so okay, that kind of makes sense. Yeah. That. All right. So the second one is the Uyghur genocide, and this has all the makings of one of those things where emotionally you can't really fight back against the mainstream Western narrative, because if you do, first of all, you hate Muslim people. Second of all, you love authoritarian dictators, because that's how China is positioned, even though that is not the government structure of China. People just do not understand Marxist-Leninist government structure is fine. And three, you're a genocide denier. And all of those things feel so bad. They feel so evil that it kind of truncates how you're allowed to learn information about this topic. And I think those of you who recently came to learn the truth about Israel and Palestine, you probably went through this. You had a lot of people tell you it was very, very anti-Semitic to side with Palestine against Israel, right? And it's kind of the same situation that people try to create in the Xinjiang region when talking about the Uyghurs, right? It's like, well, you can't deny this kind of narrative because if you do, then you're being Islamophobic and really racist against Uyghurs. And so nobody has been able to, in a mainstream capacity, talk about this in a very fact-based way because people's emotions have been too high. However, a lot has happened recently. We've seen a real genocide, for example, play out in the news and the media. We know what genocide looks like. And the U.S. government has even kind of had to abandon this myth, this idea of a genocide happened in Xinjiang against the Uyghur people. They've had to alter their kind of stance on it. They've had to change it from a genocide to a cultural genocide, and now we're kind of backing off of it altogether. So I think now is the time where we actually can talk to people about this and like kind of get to the bottom of what exactly happened there. So this episode is going to be about that. It's going to be about I am going to call it a myth. The myth is the Uyghur genocide, right?
Okay. I mean, a myth is just a story. The story
is just a story. The story of the Uyghur genocide.
And you are going to essentially do a little reality testing.
We're going to do some reality testing on what you think about this story if you are not a person who has bothered to look into it much. And spoiler alert, it might infuriate you by the end of it, because it is quite infuriating, this whole tale.
It's a great sales pitch.
It's very upsetting. When you look at this, you're just like, oh my God, I hate our government so much. Mm-hmm. So, great day for other people who are China-pilled and also hate the U.S. government.
Sure.
We're going to talk about Xinjiang.
Sure.
Okay. So background info. David, what do you know about Xinjiang? What can you say about the region?
When I looked into it, and I sent you a couple things on this, I know that starting in the late 19th, early 20th century, there was a growing nationalist movement right at the time that nationalist movements were kind of getting off the ground, in which a bunch of scholars were identifying the largely Turkic population of Xinjiang with 8th or 9th century dynasty, group of people called the Uyghurs that were somehow related to the Mongols.
Yes.
Right?
That's accurate, yeah.
But that identification is itself relatively modern. I won't speak to the truth or falsity of it. It just is.
It just is.
And that sort of Uyghur nationalism, as it came to be formed at the turn of the 20th century, sort of participated in a kind of pan-Turkism.
Yes,
right.
This is correct.
Which is essentially the idea, which I love, and I think is super cool, that the Turks, as an ethnic and cultural people, extend from somewhere in Morocco, maybe, or Algeria, all the way to Finland, and then well into Kyrgyzstan and Xinjiang.
Right. So, yeah, and Xinjiang is one of 5 autonomous self-governing regions of China.
Yeah.
Do you know much about what those are and how they work?
No.
Okay. So autonomous regions, self-governing autonomous regions, they're based on the principles of Lenin's self-determination for oppressed people in Marxist-Leninist groups. This is where this comes from. This comes from a Lenin doctrine. So if you're not super familiar with Marxism or Marxism-Leninism, Marx basically came up with this whole kind of idea about how economic and political systems work, wrote it in some books. Lenin was a guy in Russia who read the books and was like, hey, this makes a lot of sense. This is cool. We should use this material to try to get ourselves out of this system of feudalism we're in and try to build a more equitable government system. A revolution happened in Russia, and Lenin afterwards kind of stepped in to take over and form the new government.
Yes.
That's a brief summary. So when Lenin started actually trying to take Marx's ideas and practically apply them to building a new government, he ran into a few things where he was like, these things need to be added to Marxist ideas in order to take these concepts and make them a practical reality. And Russia really was the first time we saw Marxist principles applied in the real world.
Can I cut in for just a moment?
Yeah.
Marx hated a revolution.
I mean,
I'm just gonna throw this out. Like
Marx hated a lot of things.
But like every goddamn time like anyone tried to do a revolution in his lifetime,
he was like, no, it's not gonna work.
he was like, fuck you guys, you are a bunch of adventurer idiots.
Yeah.
Burn in hell. And like in a way that like I do wonder what he would have made of Lenin. Right? Like because it was like as a guy who was just like a perpetual pessimist, right, in his life, who every time he saw a revolution was like, not buying it.
I mean, Marx had some perplexing ideas, I will say. And I think one of the biggest things that Marx got wrong was that Marx thought that a revolution in capitalism would be led from what he called a proletarian class, which was mostly made up of industrial workers.
As opposed to peasants.
But what we've seen is the most successful revolutions that have led to Marxist-Leninist governments in our lifetimes have been from peasants in largely feudal economies, agrarian feudal economies. So that's something interesting. So yeah, Lenin basically was like, all right, I'm going to add some things to this to make it more practical and make it make sense. And one of the things he added was this idea of the right to self-determination for oppressed people. He's like, look, when countries exist, they oppress people, right? And one of the ways they oppress people, we know here in the United States, is they attempt to turn the working class against each other with all of these isms. All of a sudden, this ethnic group is the problem. This group of immigrants is the problem. Women are the problem, whatever the case. So Lenin was like, because these people exist in these nations as basically a separate nation that's being totally oppressed, they should have the right to kind of guide themselves and lead themselves. And nobody else should get to make those decisions for them. And this was because of two reasons. One, it's ethically principled, right? So for example, if you're an American, a lot of American Marxist-Leninists have made the argument that there is an oppressed Black nation existing within the United States borders that should have the right to govern itself and make its own decisions and lead itself. Right. So this makes sense to you, right? Like these people have been oppressed and they should not have to listen to anybody else tell them what to do anymore. But the second kind of reason that this makes sense is that it's just logistically more sound because you cannot transition from one government structure that oppressed a large group of marginalized people into a new government structure that starts telling these people what to do and expect them to be on your team. They're just going to be more of the same bullshit.
And I tend to buy ethical appeals within right. I have my own sort of ethical shit that's whatever, but ethical appeals within a Marxist framework always ring a little bit weird to me.
Yeah, I don't think you need. This is what I was saying.
I always say go with the practical.
Go with the practical. You don't have to believe that. When I talk about the USSR, I'm you don't have to believe the USSR was kind of benevolent. A lot of the actions they did that were kind of benevolent, it just worked for them. It just made sense logistically for what they were trying to accomplish. Now, I will say, at the heart of Marxist ideology, the reason why capitalism will inherently fail, right? It's because people cannot afford to live and they will become so frustrated and upset with this that they will inevitably seek a better quality of life. And that in itself is emotional in some context. Right?
No, I mean, I think it's in the Grundrisse, and I can't remember the fucking German-ass word for it, but and by the time Capital is published, this is gone and excised from Marx's thinking, but you do see a sort of normative notion of human good in the Grundrisse that he's sort of look, you fall below a certain level of human flourishing and people are just going to be nah, fuck this. And that is fundamentally an ethical construction.
It is ethical, but also it is practical. If you want to have a country or a nation or an organization of people or a government system that lasts, you will have to solve the practical contradictions of capitalism. So you can assess this both ways. So however you want to think of it, just like something that ethically seems correct, that oppressed people should have the right to govern themselves, or logistically, if you're leading a nation, makes sense. These people aren't going to listen to you if they spent their whole lives having to listen to other people who look like you.
Yeah.
So you got to get them on your side, and the way to get them on your side is to let them have autonomy and handle things.
And this is also, right, like the thing about ideology is important here, which is like the, you know, and like we've talked about Gramsci in our Bienio Rosso episode.
Yes.
In which sort of like an oppressed people have to produce their own ideology and like intellectuals from within them, which means producing a sort of autonomous.
Yes.
Anyway.
Exactly. So there are 5 autonomous self-governing regions of China. If you listen to our Tibet episode, Tibet is one of them.
Yeah.
Taiwan is one of them. Hong Kong is one of them.
We should do a Taiwan episode.
We definitely should. So if you're hearing these names, you're probably like, whoa, like I'm noticing a trend. And the trend you're probably noticing is that you might be under the impression passively in the back of your mind that these are somehow areas of the world that China is oppressing. But in reality, these are like the 5 autonomous self-governing regions of China, and the Western world has consistently been trying to stoke a separatist movement in these areas to divide and conquer China the same way we divide it and conquer historically everywhere that's our political enemy. Korea, Vietnam, right? This is what we're trying to do here. So the Xinjiang region is one of 5 autonomous self-governing regions of China, and they are unified under Chinese leadership, these regions, but they practice self-governance for the majority of affairs. So if you remember from our Tibet episode, what that looked like there was China showed up and was like, whoa, you guys can't like enslave children and cut off their hands anymore, but you can keep doing your theocracy. I know you guys are really into your religion. That's fine. Things like that, kind of. So according to Chinese courts, here's like the quote of how this works out. Regional autonomy should be practiced in areas where minority nationalities live in concentrated communities. National autonomous areas shall be classified into autonomous regions, autonomous prefectures, and autonomous counties. All national autonomous areas are integral parts of People's Republic of China. Organs of self-government shall be established in national autonomous areas, as national autonomous areas shall inherit and carry forward the fine traditions of national cultures. Build a socialist society with an advanced culture and ideology and with national characteristics, and steadily raise the socialist consciousness and scientific and cultural levels of the people of the various nationalities. So basically what this says is like, look, you exist in China, great. China's socialist. You can't go do weird, sketchy capitalist shit. You can't start enslaving people. You can't start exploiting everybody. You still got to do socialist stuff, but everything else is all you. That's it. You can practice your religion. You can have your culture. If you have cultural traditions, like in Tibet, for example, how they have these theocratic structures, they're like, that's fine. You can keep that, you know. Do your thing just as long as it fits into a socialist umbrella.
And like is like moving towards like the like ideological construction. Like,
yeah,
it's not going to.
You can't do evil stuff.
Though that, I feel like that.
I think the evil stuff is even a practical consideration, because do you remember with Tibet, like China, okay, the communists win. They're like, yay, okay, now we're in charge of this whole place, China. And then they're like, Tibet's part of China. We got to go look at what's going on in Tibet. And they're like, oh my God, can you imagine if the Western world was out there saying Chinese people cut off the hands of enslaved children? Like, Tibet's part of China. We can't have people in the rest of the world cut off the hands of enslaved children.
As like a piece of like international propaganda and like soft power, right, or whatever. Yeah. Not a good look. Though I will say, no matter what they fucking do, like my big takeaway from everything is like anytime you hear about like a small upstart nationalist movement taking place in a place you know very little about, be a little suspect.
Yeah, it's probably the CIA. Yeah. It's probably the CIA. I mean, you know, that's a generalization, but it's one of those generalizations where if you start from that, you'll probably get to the truth a lot faster. So the chairman of the autonomous regions have to be a member of the dominant minority ethnic group within that region. That's one of the rules. So like, for example, if we were talking about establishing a self-governing autonomous region of the United States for Black Americans, we would have to have a chairman that was Black, from Black America, to represent the interests of those people, right? This is like a committee kind of thing. It's like, you guys have to represent your culture because you are existing as an oppressed group of people.
I have a question about, right, like when you're applying that to the U.S. example.
Yeah.
Because of the peculiar nature of settler colonialism as it took place in the West. So I think of the U.S. and Brazil often as being really similar. There's a geographic difference when we talk about Xinjiang, for example, and when we talk about the U.S.?
Well, the argument originally was made by a black member of the CPUSA in the 1930s for the United States. And at the time, he actually was able to draw borders on a map where the majority of black Americans lived.
Which is the pre-Northern migration.
Yes, but even taking into account the Northern migration, the majority of black Americans do live in this one still concentrated area. So that still would have a geographic kind of reference point for that, which is interesting. So, okay, so what does this look like in practice? Basically, these regions who have what's considered a large minority population just get a huge amount of leeway to self-manage as long as they want, as long as they are sticking to overarching principles of the Chinese government, like socialism. So Xinjiang, one of these regions, and it's huge. It's over 500,000 square miles in size. It's got a population of 21 million people. So if you're American, this is roughly the same population as Texas, but spread out over an area the size of Alaska, or the equivalent of Texas, California, Montana, and New Mexico combined.
Sick.
Okay, so it's huge, and it's got a pretty significant population. And just like California, Montana, New Mexico, and Texas combined, Xinjiang has a lot of really beautiful biodiversity. It's got, mountains and bodies of water and deserts, and it's really gorgeous. So it's actually a huge tourist destination. So tons of people go to Xinjiang every single year. It also, though, surprise, surprise, features large deposits of natural resources like minerals or oil. And that's something we should keep in mind while we talk about this issue. So today, Xinjiang is basically a land of, yes, like David alluded to, Turkic-speaking people. There are the Kazakhs, there are the Kyrgyz, there are the Uyghurs. And the Uyghurs are the bulk of the non-Han Chinese population that is found in Xinjiang. So they're the dominant kind of cultural group there.
And my understanding, to go back to your point about official Chinese policy, is that Chinese policy with reference to Xinjiang tends to favor, at least officially, and there seems to be some debate about linguistic policy in Xinjiang, sort of letting Xinjiang do its own thing in terms of language.
Yes, 100%.
Right.
So if you are in Xinjiang, you have currency that is not its own currency. It's still Chinese currency, but the language on the currency, there's Uyghur written on it, for example. The street signs in Xinjiang are written in Uyghur. So people in China will learn Uyghur and also Chinese.
So even if sort of at the state level, right, Han Chinese is hegemonic, in Xinjiang, you can speak Uyghur.
It's both are kind of accepted. So it would kind of be like if Southern California, all of our street signs are in English, but also Spanish.
Oh, I was going to say if we were allowed to somehow recognize the phonetic spelling of how you and I fucking talk.
So we speak English and Valley Girl. But no, it would be like, if you live in a place with a large Hispanic population, Spanish-speaking population like David and I do in Southern California and Fresno, whatever, just imagine all your normal street signs and money and everything, but it's written in English and Spanish. That's kind of the situation there. It's written in Chinese and it's written in Uyghur. So the history of Xinjiang is interesting, like David said. Before it was called Xinjiang, the area was kind of known as East Turkestan. And a lot of the separatist movements today in Xinjiang that are like, we should be separate from China, we should be our own thing, they want to call it Turkestan again, East Turkestan again. So in 60 BC, this area was originally part of what we think of as China. It was set up under the military command of the Shi Han dynasty. Mm-hmm. So basically, this area has been a part of China since 60 BC.
Okay, but I will say, granting the fact that modern states originate sort of recently.
After 60 BC. Yeah.
Right, like this is, right, I have generally, like I look askance anytime someone appeals to far antiquity to justify a border, and I think we all understand why.
Yeah, obviously.
Like we have watched a genocide happen
based on that idea, yes.
With the appeal to like, well,
historically.
In a book.
Yeah. No, but this is real. So I think we're going to talk about the same we talk about Tibet, where it's like, at various points throughout history, this has definitely been a part of China. Sometimes it's been like a little more autonomous from China. You know, they have a long-standing relationship with China, though, is the way to think about this. And by the time we stopped being in BC, and we're in the year like 200, the Han power began to decline. So the area was more kind of operating under local Uyghur leaders. But a couple hundred years later, we get to 600, 700. The Tang dynasty kind of has more power in China. And they go back into the area we now call Xinjiang and are like, hey, we're here to help again. Sorry, we disappeared for 400 years. Ha.
Help.
Hope you guys were good. Well, they're just like managing things, basically.
They're like, we are now the state.
I don't, by 600, yeah.
We're like, right, like, but this is what I'm saying, where it's like, okay, so it's like, I don't know enough of, I don't know barely anything about fucking Chinese history, but anytime anyone has tried to explain it to me, it's sort of like, oh, the border shifted here. And like for a little while, the sort of like locus of power was in this province. And for a little while, the locus of power was in this province.
That's actually a good way to think about it. So from the year like 200 to 600 or whatever, it's not like the Uyghur people in Xinjiang had no relationship with China.
Yeah.
It's literally just like what we think of as like the Chinese leadership just wasn't as present physically there because they just weren't as powerful of, you know what I mean?
Yeah, you know, like,
okay, so you know, like now, like the federal government's sending like the military into Portland.
Yes, I do.
Okay, so imagine a time where the U.S. military isn't powerful enough to just like send its people into Portland. Portland's still a part of the United States, but the United States isn't like. I mean, bad example because the United States is doing that to be horrible to Portland, but you know what I mean.
No, I mean, I just like I hesitate to think about the way you're describing it. It sounds like a bunch of like pocket protector like glasses wearing bureaucrats like wandered into Xinjiang one day in the Tang dynasty after a couple hundred years and were like
they had a presence, but it just wasn't as they just weren't as present.
Yeah,
it was more of like a long leash.
China was going
through some stuff.
Some shit.
So they were going through some stuff, and they had a little change in management. So, you know, Xinjiang wasn't super on the radar.
Yeah.
So they weren't as present there. Right. So around the 800s, 900s, Tang influence then decreased as well. And then Arab influence increased in the region, and Islam became more popular. And around this time, Turkestan became the term that was used by medieval Islamic writers to describe northern and eastern areas of Central Asia. Not really specific to state borders, though. More like we talked about based on cultural and ethnic kind of designations. So this kind of became the way to. Boy, I'm very upset. This became the way.
Forga's like, you are applying like a modern national lens to an era before nations.
I mean, this is where it is really hard, actually. Like what you're saying is correct. To try to understand these places as nations when that's not really the designation of land per se during this time, it does get a little confusing. So basically, Turkestan became what was used as a term to describe an area of Turkish-speaking nomads, and it was specifically used in opposition to the nearby Persian-speaking population. So you would just use it to differentiate them. You'd be like, there's this group of people that speak Persian, that's not them. This group of people who speak Turkish, that's Turkestan. Mm-hmm. But, you know, it wasn't like a proper country or anything. So by the 1200s, Xinjiang gets officially incorporated into the Chinese Empire by Genghis Khan. Mm-hmm. This is the Mongol thing we were talking about, right?
That we're all descended from.
Yes. And by the 1600s, the Qing dynasty is in control in China, and they're the ones that are overseeing Xinjiang. And all through the 1700s, Xinjiang retains from this point on close contact with China, operating kind of under the control of Beijing. So 1800s. 1884, the Qing dynasty officially creates these provinces in China, and boom, what do you know? Xinjiang's one of them. So then, though, Russian Tsarist forces conquer Central Asia, and they kind of take it over. And they're like, no, this is ours now, and they name the area Turkestan. So European writers begin to call the area of Central Asia that's still under the control of the Qing dynasty, by contrast, Chinese Turkestan. Mm-hmm. So this is kind of what's going on. This region gets kind of divided, the Russians are kind of in charge of part of it. China's in charge of part of it. So we have, Turkestan and Chinese Turkestan. Then 1911, 1912, the Chinese Revolution happens. And the Han commander of the Turkic troops, who's named Yang Zhenqian, takes control of Xinjiang and gets appointed governor by Beijing. So we're not under the Russians anymore. We're back with China. And in 1928, Xinjiang gets assassinated, and a lot of other leaders kind of pop up in small doses, and the power balance kind of shifts around the country. And that takes us to 1949, when the communists in China defeat the nationalists and assume control of the whole country. And boom, this is the era where, just like we see, the communists show up in Tibet to go, what's going on in this far-reaching part of China? What's going on in this far-reaching? They look at Xinjiang and they're like, what's going on in this far-reaching part of China? That's kind of its own thing over here. We got to go check it out. So by 1955, Xinjiang was already established as an autonomous region in China based on Lenin's writings. So they go, they check it out. They're like, okay, you guys clearly have your own culture. You're clearly an ethnic minority compared to the rest of us. You guys kind of self-manage. You're a part of China, obviously, still. We're not going to kick you out of China, but self-manage as long as you're kind of doing the socialism.
I gotta imagine if you are the CCP or whatever and it's 1955 and you are still trying to like fuck with Chiang Kai-shek.
Yeah.
Right. And you're just like, we just got out of World War II.
And we're fighting with nationalists still.
So we had a genocide happen to us.
Yeah, they were, yes, a horrible genocide against people.
And then immediately after the genocide, the Americans came in and appointed the people who did the genocide to run our railroads for like a hot sec.
Mm-hmm.
And then we got Chiang Kai-shek trying to deal heroin.
Yep.
Right. I got to imagine like, hey, there's a province in like the far west of our country that seems to be kind of doing like, there is a pragmatic as opposed to ideological reason for being like, hey guys, kind of do your own thing.
Yeah, we don't have the resources or the interest right now to micromanage you. We got a bunch of stuff going on down here.
Yeah.
You guys seem fine. Don't go enslaving children or anything. Tibet, hey. But, handle your own stuff. We don't have the resources for this right now.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what happened. So Xinjiang gets established as an autonomous self-governing region in China, still a part of China, but with a lot of leeway to just handle things themselves. And veterans from the Communist Army in Xinjiang start to create farms to try to create kind of some economic stability and help develop the region under the influence and guide of Beijing, of China, basically. So 1962, the Sino-Soviet split happens. And this is basically where our commie besties, Russia and China, are like, we are commie besties no more.
And
we are mad.
Mao was like, Khrushchev, you betrayed Stalinism.
Yes.
And Khrushchev's like, yo, man, we gotta live.
Oh, okay.
No, I'm not pro Khrushchev. I'm not like a pro, like, but I am sort of like, I got to imagine from like a real politic position, if you're Khrushchev, not exactly a man of steel.
No, that is, I think we all can agree that.
No, you are not like, and you're like, fuck, I gotta give an address to the whatever party Congress about this shit. I'm just gonna be like, that was some other guy.
Yeah, I mean, that's literally what happened. Khrushchev's like, oh, it's all everything bad that's ever happened in Russia was because of Stalin.
That was some other guy. That was not me.
Yeah.
Fuck that.
Okay, so for whatever reason, China, USSR, not friends anymore. And their split actually causes a lot of political instability in the world.
Yeah.
They've been kind of a united front of commies doing commie things.
And this is also, right, at a moment in which the third world is kind of popping off. And so there's a question of who's supporting who.
Right. What side are you on? So this creates some political instability everywhere, including in Xinjiang. And some Kazakh people move from Xinjiang into Kazakhstan, which was then a part of the USSR. So 1966 to 1976, China obviously experiences the Cultural Revolution, which we've talked about in episodes before. And this is a crackdown on all religious expression throughout China, amongst other things. But the religious expression in particular affects the Uyghurs because they're Muslim. And, it affects every religious group in China, but the Uyghurs are particularly affected because they are Muslim people. And, the Chinese government, like we've talked about this before, I think David and I both kind of like their approach to religion, which is that, you can have your religion, you just can't proselytize it.
My take on the Cultural Revolution is that it was a response. I'm not going to say the best response,
right,
but it was a response to an actually real problem, which was the increased bureaucratization of sort of like post-war Chinese politics.
So the way China talks about this is the Chinese government assesses this now in retrospect and is like, look, Comrade Mao did a lot of great stuff for China. Obviously, we look up to him and we're so grateful to his contributions to China as we know it today. However, the Cultural Revolution probably didn't need to happen, and it probably was ultimately bad for China the way it went down. We still respect Comrade Mao for his contributions, but these probably wasn't great. And so the thing about how it affected like their religious expression is that China has a pretty sane and normal, I would say, approach to religion. Like, you can practice your religion all you want. You can practice religion in the privacy of your own home. You can practice religion in religious institutions and churches and mosques. You just can't go out into the streets and try to convert people. You can't get on a soapbox and start preaching about how the end of the world is coming and everybody has to give you $80 or they'll die.
I mean, that does pose a problem for religions where it is a part of their sort of articles of faith
To proselytize. And during the Cultural Revolution, I will say the boundaries regarding what was proselytizing and not got real blurry.
Yeah, but certain Protestant denominations,
you have to proselytize as part of the faith. Or Mormons.
You have to, let's say, evangelize.
Evangelize is a nicer way to say it.
Yeah.
Sure. So during the Cultural Revolution, the boundaries did get a little murky between what was proselytizing versus just practicing your faith, and the Uyghurs did experience that for being Muslim, the same way everybody throughout China did, but for a different religious expression. So by the 1980s, right, the Cultural Revolution is done, and there's like an Islamic revival that hits Xinjiang because they're like, look, we weren't as able to practice our religion as openly in the 60s and 70s, but like now we can, and it kind of came back in a bigger way. And around this time, a small number of Uyghurs began discussing wanting their own state that was separate from China. However, this is a fringe, very small group of people, and it was not very large, this movement. It was around 200 Uyghur Muslims from the Xinjiang region, remember, of like over 20 million people. And some of them went and actually trained under bin Laden in like religious extremist kind of camps to fight for separatism.
So we're in the 1980s.
Yes.
So we are in prime CIA funding bin Laden in Afghanistan
era. Yep.
Okay.
And lots of people from outside of China started trying to push and prod and establish Uyghur separatist groups within China during this time for their own religious and political motivations. So one report talking about this said, without having carried out a massive recruitment, these groups have concentrated on enrolling young people from the urban working class, mainly from southern Xinjiang. And again, these groups were small, they weren't very large in number, and they did not reflect the general outlook of Uyghurs in Xinjiang, but they were extremely results-oriented. Mm-hmm. So another report said the revival of the Uyghurs' Islamic culture and identity led during the 1980s to the formation of student associations aiming to promote the culture of the Uyghurs. One was called the Tengritak Association. One was the Youth Association of East Turkestan. There was the Students' Cultural and Scientific Association. And some of these student associations, which reflect the growing strength of the democratic student movement in China, seem quickly to have adopted a militant style. That's what the report says.
I love that it's just a style.
It's just a style. So basically what we see is there's some people there who are religious extremists who also want a nationalist movement. It's not a lot of people. They're mostly young, and they're pretty aggro about it. So in the 30 years between 1949 and 1979, it's important to note that there were like no real demonstrations held by Xinjiang kind of Uyghur students.
Well, there are only 200 of them.
Well, these are the students that were like wanting a separatist movement. There was around 200 of them. But the Uyghur students in general, remember, they're the dominant kind of ethnic group in the region, and it's a region of 20 million.
No, but like the separatists,
yes,
trying to like if you're like 200 guys and like in like a region of
20 million,
and you're like, hey, you're a drop in the fucking bucket.
You're a drop in the bucket. So it's not like this came out of a huge tradition of Uyghurs fighting to be separate from China. There were like no demonstrations from 1949 to 1979 asking for this. But after 1980, student demonstrations started to become semi-regular from this group of 200 people that again were kind of being pushed into a direction by some outside forces outside of China that were associated, for example, with bin Laden and the CIA-funded kind of...
Okay, this is off topic or whatever. We've got color revolutions. Do you remember, I feel like something that doesn't get talked about a lot is fabric revolutions.
Fabric revolutions?
The velvet revolution.
Oh!
Like, I think we need like a silk revolution, cotton revolution. Like, we need all the...
I think the Xinjiang one we could call the cotton revolution for reasons I'll talk about later. So... when these demonstrations start breaking out, it's basically Uyghur students from 7 different kind of colleges around Xinjiang, including Xinjiang University in Urumqi. And they actually, in Xinjiang University in Urumqi, had a demonstration on December 12th of 1985 that was of particular note. It kind of got a little big. In June of 1986, a few months later, another demonstration got organized by a student association in Xinjiang University, the same college, calling for no Chinese Han people to be able to come into Xinjiang.
So they were like...
Very xenophobic, anti-immigrant kind of thing.
We are going to be classically ethno-nationalist.
Yes. And this is David's critique, for those of you who listen to our podcast, of nationalism in general. My argument is that nationalism can be a good preliminary rallying force for people to fight off their colonizing oppressors. David thinks it inevitably devolves into weird, racist, xenophobic nationalism.
Here's the thing, right? Like, it's like what Hobsbawm has, like, the 3 stages of fucking nationalism, which is like... I can't remember what the fucking first one is, but the second one is like an identification of a cultural tradition, which is usually like a small group of middle-class intellectuals more or less make that shit up. And
yes.
Like you can kind of see it like in the age of nationalism, a lot of people being like, we discovered an ancient story. And it's like...
about our people, and then you're like, this isn't actually
this is what you wrote this yourself.
You're crafting retroactively crafting it.
And then like the third stage is always like the identification of the state with the sort of like nascent intellectual tradition of like cultural nationalism. And post Wilson, like the post League of Nations, like the sort of doctrine that like any people that can be identified as like a cultural unit should be a fucking state, and that creeps me the fuck out.
Yeah, that is how you get into weird xenophobic ethno-state like Israel type territory fast. So, you know, you could see this kind of starting. Again, you have 200 extremists, and all of a sudden they're like, we hate Han Chinese people. And you're like, okay, you could pitch this as being like, because there are oppressors. Or you could be like, are you just being like weird and racist and xenophobic to people who are different than you?
Yeah.
And I feel like to actually understand that experience, you probably would have to be there during the 1980s to really understand the vibe of it. But what I can say is, again, this did not get super popular. So odds are this did not, no matter which one it was, reflect the general feeling of people in Xinjiang and of Uyghur people in general. So these student groups, again, very small. One report said, quote, admittedly, these movements are not mass movements. Uyghur militancy is driven mostly by a fringe group of young students. And this same report went on to explain that these protests were led mostly by 2 groups. One was socialist and secular, and they relied on Soviet aid during the Sino-Soviet split.
So they're like, we love Khrushchev, or I guess it's Brezhnev.
Yeah,
and
we love
Gorbachev.
Russia. How dare China split with them?
You know, I will say, there's a funny story. I can't remember his name, but there is a fabulous director of Russian comedies during the Soviet period who would have fallen under censorship, but Brezhnev loved them so much, and it's very like Marx Brothers style shit, so that all of these comedies, which Shurik's New Adventure is the best one, made it past the censors. I'm just gonna say I love Brezhnev just for that. I love, like, he made Shurik's New Adventures happen.
Well, okay, so these students were young communists who seemed more upset with the Sino-Soviet split, and they were like, maybe we should be Russia instead of China. That was kind of the vibe of them. The other group, though, is really the group to think about when we think about the general tone of these protests. And this is a group that was anti-communist and very Islamic in tradition, and it was centered in the south of Xinjiang. Marxism had fallen out of favor with this group, and they became more popular than the first group, but they were still extremely fringe. When we say more popular, remember, this is like 200 people across an entire area the size of what? California, Texas, New Mexico, and what was the other place combined that we talked about?
Did you say Colorado?
Called something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
So this is 200 people spread across that whole region. Is the equivalent to think of if you're an American, so still very, very small. And this group of people basically became a united nationalist front for a pan-Turkish movement. And they actually were organized around something called the East Turkestan Islamic Party, or ETIP, which is going to be important as we talk about this. So, This is happening in the 1980s. It's small, it's fringe, it's nothing really to note. And it wouldn't have been that big of a deal if they hadn't started to get more and more militant getting into the 90s, and if there weren't weird associations with like Osama bin Laden and Al Qaeda that popped up later.
So this is right. I got to imagine if I'm Joe CIA and I've been trying to fuck up Russia's shit in like late Soviet period by fucking with Afghanistan, right? And it just happens to have the knock-on effect of like radicalizing a bunch of people in Xinjiang.
You got a 2 for 1.
Like you're like,
we're stoked.
Oh fuck, man! I'm like,
I did it.
Charlie Wilson's war is apparently 2 fucking wars.
Yes. So you're probably so stoked, right? So in the 1990s, China starts investing a great deal into Xinjiang. And they're trying to, like, you know, Xinjiang, again, the same way Tibet's kind of a little further from central China. The 1990s is when China really starts to take efforts to eliminate the gap between urban and rural wealth distribution. And we all know by now, China has completely eradicated extreme poverty in the entire country. And that figure, that stat does not come from China. It comes from the World Bank and the IMF, who are notoriously anti-communist. But even they had to acknowledge, like, yeah, China basically got rid of poverty. But the way they did this was by aggressively trying to redistribute resources and wealth allocation from urban areas to rural areas. And Xinjiang was more rural than other areas of China in the 1990s. So this meant they were going into Xinjiang and being like, okay, this is more of a suburban and rural kind of area, and we need to build infrastructure here, and we need to facilitate the flow of wealth from our city centers into Xinjiang, not just the opposite direction.
They're saying the city surrounds the countryside.
Yes. So, along with this, though, some Han Chinese people start moving into the region because there's new opportunities. And remember, there was that fringe group of extremists who were like, we hate Han Chinese people. Like,
which is within the state of China, the overwhelming majority of people.
Yes. I mean, the thing I can think of would be like if native people in Southern California were like, we don't want any more white people here. Which are like, I totally understand that. That makes sense to me. However, you can't build an ethno-state.
I mean, like, just because of the nature of the United States and like the peculiar history of settler colonialism.
I guess that is, it's different from
right, like,
yeah.
I'm going to say this is Bretons in northern France being like, you're from Marseille? Get the fuck out of here.
Okay, that's
right,
better because white people did violently colonize the
right, like
these are just people who have always kind of coexisted next to each other.
This is we're from Caledonia. Fuck you, rest of Spain.
You know what this is like? This is like people from like if people from California started to get really mad at people from Oregon for moving here.
I mean, people from Oregon historically
hate
California.
But it would be like that. So
I used to love driving around Portland with my California leads and just being like, yeah, fuck you guys. I'm gonna drive like I'm going 90 miles an hour in my fucking Volvo.
Right. So you're right. It is different because it wasn't a settler colonization project. These are just people who are next to each other. So that probably is a better example. So the economic stability of Xinjiang grows. It increases. These kind of projects to build more infrastructure and invest in it and try to get it so the flow of money isn't going from Xinjiang to kind of the urban city centers of China, but is reciprocated and maybe even going from the urban city centers into the rural areas. This works. And things start to improve financially and in terms of political stability in Xinjiang as well. But the nationalist anti-Han fringe groups of like 200 people or whatever are really, really mad that there are more Han Chinese people in the region, right? Because they're pretty xenophobic about it. They're like, no, we don't like you guys being here. We don't want you here. They don't like their neighbors. So in April of 1990, an insurrection happens. And it happens under the leadership of that East Turkestan Islamic Party, ETIP. And the head of that party at the time is Yusuf Zaydin, right? And he's not the head of the party on the whole. He's just the head of like the local Xinjiang kind of branch of it. And this actually led to the creation of the Turk Islamic Republic of East Turkestan for several days.
So this is like the St. Louis commune of Xinjiang.
Yes. So a few angry students are like, absolutely no, we hate our Han Chinese neighbors. We are taking over. And it's a full insurrection. And several dozen people die on the insurgent side.
Mm-hmm.
So It's not great. And that's because the Chinese army had to be deployed to stop the rebellion because they were like trying to do a coup, basically.
Madeline is saying National Guard, which I find a very funny. Speaking of Oregon-hating Californians, the fucking California National Guard is the one deployed in Portland.
Is it? God, that's just to mess with them. Donald Trump did it on purpose because he's a petty little bitch.
I think that's... I gotta, like...
I mean, our country's a joke.
It's a fucking joke.
It's a fucking joke. So, and again, this is an anti-Marxist nationalist movement, like a xenophobic, ethno-state-wanting nationalist movement. Like, think about the equivalent of, like, white Nazis in the United States. How they want to form, like, an ethno-state nationalist movement here, and they're like, oh, we hate all these brown people next door to us. It's kind of that level of fringe extremism. Like, that's how other people in Xinjiang, from all reports, are kind of looking at them. They're like, those guys are kooky. Like, what is going on there?
So just, like, to give it, like... to paint this in terms that I would understand, because I'm a dumb guy. I'm a dumb guy.
Allegory.
This is like, right, like, I'm in East Hollywood. I'm just like bopping around. I'm going to the goddamn Ralphs. I'm going to the Lazy Acres. And one day, some of my neighbors are like, actually, we're a separatist movement. And fuck anyone from not East Hollywood. You can't go to the Lazy Acres anymore. Like, the Lazy Acres has been occupied.
Yes, like this.
Okay,
yes.
this is...
So most people in Xinjiang are like, what the fuck are the kids doing? This is wild.
I just want my pokey.
Yeah, and they're like, we don't want any part of this, right? But the followers of, the ETIP are out on the streets. They're shouting down with socialism. They're shouting Marxism suppressed religion. Now it's religion's turn to suppress Marxism. They're saying unite all the Turk people. Long live Eastern Turkestan. They're also saying to take Baran, an area of Xinjiang, take it over and establish Eastern Turkestan for real. So, yeah, they're very vocal that they're trying to overthrow the government.
I gotta say, this is reminiscent of, like, the question with which Richard Wright ends The Color Line when he goes to the Bandung conference, and he's sort of like, okay, we've got all these, like, third worldist type movements going on, and, like, but there is this, like, nascent question of nationalism and like what's going to win out, a sort of like religious ethno-nationalist idea or a socialist idea,
right?
And he's like, this is going to be the post-war tension.
I mean, I feel like this really is, we see this all the time. That's the same way it evolved into Nazis versus communists, fascists versus communists. And the Nazi tradition, the fascist tradition obviously comes from this idea of like a nationalist ethno-state ideology. And communism is always opposed to that. And it is hard because, like, my first example where I was kind of like, well, maybe it's like people who are native being like, please don't come here. But you're right. It wasn't a settler colonization project. It was literally just some people being, like, very xenophobic about their neighbors because they both are from this area and this region historically just next door to each other. So it is hard because these nationalist movements, I mean, if left unchecked, they do become weird xenophobic ethno-states fast. And you want to, on one hand, protect people from settler colonization and from like gentrification and things like that. But on the other hand, you have to recognize those are structural, right? And the issue is resource allocation. And if you don't recognize them as structural government issues, they're affected by resource allocation, you just end up wanting to build an ethno-state.
Yeah.
And that is bad. So, it's an interesting kind of consideration. So, this separatist movement, again, very, very small. I read one place it was around 0.1% of people in Xinjiang that even supported it. I can't find the original source on that, so take that with a grain of salt, everybody. But that is something I read.
Madeline hallucinated it.
I hallucinated the figure in a dream.
Madeline is AI.
Yeah.
Actually, why is that not a way of canceling you?
To just claim I was AI?
That you are AI.
Yeah, well, Baby Lens used to have a marketing gimmick when they worked for the company that I was AI, so.
Sick.
Yeah, but,
I'm just saying, if you're trying to fucking cancel, also, I don't ascribe to the notion that Madeline has ever been canceled.
It's because you're not online.
No, I know, but I am online occasionally, and I see people yell at you, and I'm like, this is a teenager in Sheboygan.
Yeah, well...
not to denigrate teenagers in Sheboygan. You are lovely.
I'm sure there's many great ones.
Yeah.
So, okay. So whatever the case, I had seen somewhere there was like 0.1% that actively supported it and like 2 to 5% that were like, well, I understand where they're coming from. And 95%, they were like, absolutely fucking not. We don't know what they're doing and they don't speak for us. So I saw this somewhere once, but again, I couldn't find it when I searched. So not that this, everything I usually tell you is fact, unless I say this is my opinion. That cannot be confirmed or denied. That is just a memory I have. It could be a fever dream. So March 1996 to 1999. The CCP has to institute new regulations to push back against this separatist movement because they tried to overthrow the government, right? So they're like, hey, you guys are doing terrorist activity and trying to stage a coup. You cannot do that. You are 200 people, basically. You do not speak for this entire region. Even though the region has the right to self-governance and autonomy, you are not speaking for the region. You are just like 200 weirdos. So you got to stop doing this. So we're going to fight back against this. And they don't go quietly into the night. They're like, no, they fight back. They carry out guerrilla attacks on police and military that are stationed throughout the region. They start assassinating Han officials of the government or even Uyghurs who were not supporting the separatist movement. They start bombing places throughout Xinjiang. And it's kind of like chaos breaking out, right? Small scale, though. Again, they don't have the numbers.
I'm actually like... Just as a person who has Ulrika Meinhof as his background on his phone, I'm going to say I love a terrorist.
Well, you heard it here first, folks. David loves terrorism. So they're doing terrorism. They're doing terrorism. There's not anything, they're doing terrorism. So in 1997, in that place, Urnquai, remember, that was where there was the college that had one of the rebellions early on. 4 bombs are planted on bus routes. And the explosions that come from these 4 bombs end up killing 9 people and wounding 74 more. And remember, these are just regular. These are also Uyghurs. These are also just people in Xinjiang. And the responsibility for this attack was claimed by the Organization for East Turkestan Freedom, which was based in Turkey. So important to note. Remember how earlier we said these kind of movements were actually being pushed and prodded by people who weren't even in Xinjiang?
And this is a part of the pan-Turkic bullshit.
Yes.
Which, not bullshit. I have no opinion. I don't know enough about pan-Turkism.
Right. But this is a group of people not within Xinjiang who, are kind of stoking this as well. And this led to a 100-day crackdown against kind of these separatist groups called the General Campaign Against Terrorism that lasted from April to June of 1999. Now, we get to the 2000s. 2001, what happens that might be relevant to this?
Britney Spears releases her
Hit me maybe one more time.
I think that was like 99.
Yeah,
actually.
okay.
But
no. It is 9/11. 9/11 happens in the United States, right? And all of a sudden, international conversations start happening about Islamic extremism. They're like, is this a problem? What's going on here? The United States, obviously, we do our own thing. We're like, great, this is excellent justification for us to kill millions of people
also
and displace millions more. Yay.
Within our own borders to hire like an FBI agent to find like the most disaffected teenager in upstate New York and be like, hey man, maybe you should like blow up an embassy.
Yeah, we start trying to, all of the counterterrorism efforts that the United States engages in, it's like textbook what not to do. We literally staged a war that destabilized an entire region, murdered millions of people, and everybody who survived it hated us more and was radicalized against us to want to harm us more. Domestically, we launched full-scale terror campaigns against our own people. The police basically looked the other way while mobs of white people started attacking anyone who looked vaguely brown. The FBI and not even just the FBI, the military started engaging in all sorts of basically illegal, extremely violent, brutal campaigns against anybody suspected of being, quote unquote, a terrorist. So in the United States, we basically are like a textbook case of what not to do.
And I mean, this is like, I will say, this is, not to go far afield from what you're talking about, but I do feel like there is like this sort of like vulgar Weberianism in which sort of like the cultural tendency, and I think Christopher Hitchens is a good example of this in the West, is to say that ideology determines material conditions as opposed to
the Marxist position,
like,
right?
And so this is when Christopher Hitchens comes out with like Islam is like a barbaric religion of like this, and like that becomes, you get like Charlie Hebdo kind of shit, like,
yes.
And that becomes sort of the sort of hegemonic Western response is to be like, there's a problem with Islam.
Right, exactly. So this is exactly what the West does. And by default, maybe brown people.
Yeah.
Maybe everybody brown is the problem and Islam's the problem, not us and our policies of repression, whatever. So China, though, we're going to see, takes a different approach to solving this problem, and we're going to get into it. But we're not there yet. Right now, we're in November 2001, and the Chinese Foreign Affairs Minister declares at the UN that, quote, the terrorist forces of East Turkestan are trained, equipped, and financed by international terrorist organizations. Now, remember that ETIM? We talked about this? No, we talked about ETIP, but not ETIM. So ETIM at this time is another one of these groups, and this is the East Turkestan Islamic Movement. And this was founded by someone named Hassan Masim, who was a Uyghur from Xinjiang's Kashgar region. And ETIM at the time was seeking an independent state called East Turkestan that would cover an area that included parts of Turkey, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region in China.
This is an eminently practicable national program that everyone's going to get on board with.
Yeah.
Turkey, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, China, they're all going to be like, hey.
These 7 countries, yes. And the leaders of the ETIM apparently met with Osama bin Laden in 1999 and also again in February 2001. And he's alleged to have provided them with, quote unquote, fabulous sums of money, according to some reports.
Why do you think Osama bin Laden had all of these fabulous sums of money?
Well, he was rich to start with.
No, I'm making a joke about Saudi Arabia.
Yeah. Okay, so the first mention of ETIM as a group surfaced around the year 2000 when a Russian newspaper actually reported that Osama bin Laden had pledged funds to the Islamic movement of Uzbekistan and ETIM during a 1999 meeting in Afghanistan. Now, according to the Council for Foreign Relations, which is usually a pretty pro-capitalist Western source, quote, some experts say ETIM is an umbrella organization for many splinter groups, including ones that operate in Pakistan and Central Asia. The Turkestan Islamic Party, TIP, for instance, is one of the most prominent groups, formed in 2006 by Uyghurs who fled to Afghanistan and Pakistan in the 1990s. That group took credit for a series of attacks in several Chinese cities in 2008. Including deadly bus explosions in Shanghai and Kunming. According to U.S.-based intelligence firm Stratfor, the TIP's claims of responsibility appear exaggerated, but the threat TIP poses cannot be ignored. Stratfor also said that the TIP had expanded its presence on the internet, issuing videos calling for a jihad by Uyghurs in Xinjiang. Ben Envenzek, the head of a U.S.-based independent terrorism monitoring firm called Intel Center, says it's unclear whether the TIP is separate from ETIM, but notes that the group's objectives are both Islamic and nationalist. So this is kind of like what reports that are not exact, like this is definitely not the Chinese government coming out saying this, right? Like internationally, it's pretty well agreed, like, okay, all these different countries are dealing with this small terrorist group that wants to form a new country that covers these, 7 different countries that's based on one ethno group, like an ethno state. They want to form an ethno state out of these 7 countries. And this is pretty agreed upon by everybody, regardless of their ideology. Just in case you're like, this is Chinese communist propaganda. It's definitely not. This is something everybody was talking about. Now, in 2002, January, a Chinese government study reported that ETIM had received money, weapons, and support from a terrorist organization we're all familiar with, Al-Qaeda, right? So, according to the report, ETI militants were trained by Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan and crossed back into Xinjiang afterwards, where they set up terrorist cells that were really small and dispersed throughout the region. In August of 2002, the USA actually designated ETIM as a terrorist organization after it carried out a planned attack of a U.S. embassy in Kyrgyzstan. And remember, the ETIM, they're not just mad at China, they're not just mad at communism. This isn't just like Uyghurs in China are mad at the Chinese government. This is like a totally separate thing. This is like a group of people who want to form their own country out of 7 others. So it's not just affecting China, it's affecting all these other countries too. And they get listed by the U.S. State Department after this as being one of the more extreme separatist groups in the region. And the region, again, large, covering 7 different countries. So Deputy Secretary of State Richard L. Armitage announces at this time that ETIM had been added to a State Department list of terrorist groups. We froze its assets in the United States, and we said the group, quote, committed acts of violence against unarmed civilians without any regard for who was hurt. And so I'm including all this stuff about the United States so you guys understand that the idea that there was a violent Uyghur separatist movement in China is something the United States originally agreed. They were like, yes, this is real. This is true. And that's going to be important when we talk about this later. So the State Department said that ETIM had received training and funding from Al-Qaeda. We agreed with that. We confirmed that was true, and had fought in the group's ranks against the U.S. troops during Operation Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan. What a name. Wild name. Okay. So a spokesman for the U.S. Embassy said ETIM worked with Osama bin Laden's Al-Qaeda network and was, quote, planning attacks against U.S. interests abroad, including the U.S. Embassy in Kyrgyzstan. So multiple different people are like, yes, this is real. This is a terrorist group. It's happening.
So
they hate all of us.
So what you're saying is that if you are like, oh my God, like the Chinese are genociding the Uyghurs, and I heard it from Radio Free Asia or whatever, this would like U.S. type sources were not always in agreement with that.
No.
Yeah, with that, like the narrative has changed.
The narrative has shifted, and all of this context and background for what ends up happening in China that gets mischaracterized as a Uyghur genocide is important because it all does come from this. And this is stuff that the U.S. government, up until it was politically convenient, agreed with was real and happening. So ETIM's leader also became a terrorist on the most wanted list, basically in China. Hassan Masum, remember? He was later killed by Pakistani forces on October 2nd, 2003. Because, again, this affected multiple different countries, and all these different countries were trying to figure out a way to deal with this issue. And he had previously said, we don't have any organizational contact or relations with Al-Qaeda or the Taliban. Maybe some individuals fought alongside them on their own, though. So he was basically like, look, we're not formally associated with them, but a lot of people in our ranks probably did, yeah.
No, he Mariah carried.
What do you mean?
He Mariah carried Al-Qaeda.
What do you mean?
Dude, I don't know her.
Oh, yes, he did. He was like, oh, we don't know. Maybe some of our people worked with them. I don't know. But even he confirmed that people in ETIM had worked with Al-Qaeda. He was just like, we're not officially this.
They're not our besties. Did we share a dorm room?
Sure.
Sure.
Yeah.
Did we walk to the dining hall every day together?
Maybe.
Did we work out every day?
Yes. Were we fighting for the same thing just in different groups and we shared members?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. But we're not like the same, is basically what he said. So 2 suspected ETI members, meanwhile, get deported to China from Kyrgyzstan in May of 2002 because they're doing terrorism in Kyrgyzstan. And Kyrgyzstan is like, China, these are your nationals. Get them out of our borders. This is weird. They are planning terrorist attacks. And the Kyrgyz government identified the men as Mehmet Yasin and Mehmet Sadiq and said they were planning attacks on embassies there, just like all the intelligence had said would happen, as well as markets and public gathering places in Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan. So 2007 comes along, and a Chinese raid on a training camp in Xinjiang ends up killing 18 terrorist suspects and 1 policeman in the region. 17 more suspects end up getting captured, quote unquote. Explosives get seized from this kind of operation. And the raid was said to have provided evidence of ties to international terrorist forces. In 2008, July, ETIM, under the banner now of TIP, remember the U.S. government was like, we don't know if they're the same or what's going on, but they have the same goals. Now ETIM is actually operating under the banner of TIP, threatens the Olympic Games in Beijing. And is like, don't do Olympics here. We're going to do terrorism.
I gotta say, I agree with that.
David thinks that's what he's happening in Los Angeles.
Listen, the No Olympics LA campaign has been way too milquetoast. I agree with that.
Well,
our cop budget is out of fucking control.
FBI is going to show up at our houses, David. You can't just go on a podcast and say we need to do militant terrorism against the Olympics.
I'm trying to raise our listenership. We got to get the...
You want to make it incendiary.
No, I just want I feel like...
You want the FBI to listen.
Yeah, I'm like... Hey guys, subscribe to our Patreon.
Hey FBI. Okay, well, for legal purposes, that is a joke, and David was not advocating we do terrorism against the Olympics in Los Angeles, right, David?
Yes.
David? So, 2009, July, Urumqi, that same location, remember that it had the 2 other kind of uprisings, has a revolt again of these types of separatists. So 2011, ETIM takes credit for 2 attacks that happened that primarily target government officials in Xinjiang. One is an incident at a police department that killed 4 people, and a second is a series of bomb and knife attacks in Kashgar that killed 12 people and injure over 40. So this is kind of like, it's not going away, right? It's small but persistent. So 2013, a paper comes out in Strategic Studies Quarterly. And Philip Potter, who's a political analyst, writes that, quote, China's ongoing security crackdown in Xinjiang has forced the most militant Uyghur separatists into volatile neighboring countries, such as Pakistan, where they are forging strategic alliances with and even leading jihadist factions affiliated with al-Qaeda and the Taliban. So now where people are like, they're definitely affiliated with these groups, and China is kicking them out of China, but they're just going to other nearby countries. Because remember, this is like happening across 7 different countries. And in 2013, a car bomb attack happens in China, not in Xinjiang, and it kills 5 people and injures 40 more, just like regular civilians. And this marks the first time that the government officially in China came out and said, hey, we know ETIM did this attack. Before, they kind of been like, we think it's ETIM, we're getting mixed signals. Some people are claiming like responsibility for it. We don't know. This is the first time they're like, it is ETIM, and they are committing terrorism against civilians in China. So China's security chief labels the group, quote, the most direct and realistic security threat to the country at the time. 2018, the U.S. military conducts a bombing raid near China and Tajikistan targeting ETIM. And General John Nicholson, the head of the U.S. forces in Afghanistan, says there will be no safe haven for any terrorist group, and we will continue to hunt them across the country in regards to this bombing. So at this point, the United States and China are actually working together to stop this small group of Uyghur extremist separatists who, again, are not reflective of the majority of people there, called ETIM. Now, 2019, China is like, this isn't going away. We have to change something. And they actually adopt an approach that I think is really interesting, and it ends up being really effective. And the closest way I can explain this is that it's a transformative justice approach. They're like,
okay, that you might.
No,
Okay,
it is. Bear with me. China is like, and again, you don't have to love China. You don't think if they're super sweet people. It's just what makes sense. What causes crime?
Poverty and want.
Exactly. So China is like, these people will not be radicalized if they have good lives.
Yeah.
So they go into China and they start talking to the friends of Xinjiang, sorry.
Yeah.
And they start talking to people who know people who've been recruited by these extremist groups, these terrorist extremist groups. And they're like, talk to me about this person. Like, what was going on with their lives? Like, why were they recruited?
Can we recruit them to do like a false flag terrorist and then prosecute them and send them to Guantanamo Bay? We're collaborating with the United States.
This is the United States approach, basically, yeah. But China doesn't do this. They're like, what made these people susceptible, basically, to being radicalized on the internet, which many of them were, by the equivalent of the alt-right pipeline happening in China. And a lot of the people were just like, oh, like, yeah, this person didn't have a job. They, like, lived at home with their family. They didn't know a lot of people, And it kind of paints the same picture that when you read about it, reminds me of the people who get radicalized into the alt-right pipeline here in the United States. Mm-hmm. They're mostly young men. They are economically frustrated. They're very isolated socially.
They play copious amounts of annoying video games.
I'm not sure if these people play video games, but, everything else.
They read Ben Shapiro.
Kind of, yeah. But basically, because they're listening to these ETIM-type personalities on the internet. So China is basically like, okay, they don't have job opportunities. They don't have money. They're stuck living at home with their parents, and they're isolated. We need to invest in education, right? Yeah. So they open up education centers. They open up schools. They open up colleges. They open up adult vocational centers to try to train people to get jobs, because they're like, all right, this makes sense. They don't have anything going on in their lives. We need to give them good lives. So they open up a series of multiple different educational programs, but specifically the thing we're going to talk about is the vocational adult education centers in Xinjiang.
You mean the concentration camp?
Whoa, Adrian says, don't jump ahead. Yeah, we'll get there. So their explanation of this makes a lot of sense. They say the United Nations Plan of Action to Prevent Violent Extremism notes that poverty, unemployment, the absence of an alternative employment opportunity, and low levels of education are the background causes of violent extremism, along with the distortion and exploitation by violent extremist groups of religious beliefs, ethnic differences, and political ideologies. The Plan of Action says that to counter violent extremism, we have to broaden our responses, engage earlier, and address the drivers of violent extremism. This is their document they release after doing all these interviews and studies before they introduce their plan to stop this. And this makes sense, right? And again, you don't have to believe, whatever. I'm China pilled. You don't have to be China pilled. This just does make sense, and it does go along with the United Nations, the UN's plan for how to prevent violent extremism. So these schools are supposed to target people who are prone to recruitment by Al-Qaeda at the time, affiliated groups. They're supposed to give them an opportunity to just have a normal life so they don't resort to this, right?
Get them girlfriends.
Get them jobs and girlfriends,
Yeah.
basically, yeah. So as the Chinese government states, terrorism and extremism are the common enemies of humanity, and the fight against terrorism and extremism is the shared responsibility of the international community. It is a fundamental task to any responsible government acting on basic principles to remove the malignant tumor of terrorism and extremism that threatens people's lives and security, to safeguard people's dignity and value, to protect their rights to life, health, and development, and to ensure that they enjoy a peaceful and harmonious social environment. The quote continues, over the years, to ensure public safety and well-being, the international community has spared no effort and made tremendous sacrifices in preventing and combating terrorism and extremism. Many countries and regions, in light of their own conditions, have developed effective measures and drawn valuable lessons from these efforts. Xinjiang is a key battlefield in the fight against terrorism and extremism in China. For some time, Xinjiang has been plagued by terrorism and religious extremism, which pose a serious threat to the lives of people in the region. Addressing both the symptoms and root causes and integrating preventative measures and a forceful response, Xinjiang has established vocational education and training centers in accordance with the law to prevent the breeding and spread of terrorism and religious extremism, effectively curbing the frequent terrorist incidents and protecting the rights to life, health, and development of the people of all ethnic groups. Worthwhile results have been achieved. So, this sounds pretty good, and this does work super, super well. Basically, after China does this, there's like zero terrorist incidents.
No more stabbings.
No more
Everyone's got
bombings.
girlfriends.
Everyone's got girlfriends and jobs.
Yeah.
They're chilling. The West, though, apparently decides they don't agree.
Well, they're like, we can't get girlfriends for our own incels.
So, and one thing that I think, this isn't included in our source documents, there's a map, basically, and it's shaded in with two colors. One color represents the people who approve of China's measures that they've taken to stop the spread of terrorism in the region, and the other is a group of people who don't approve of it. And when you look at the map, the people who approve of it are all of the nearby countries who also dealt with this same group, ETIM, and who also are predominantly Muslim countries.
So Kyrgyzstan is like, fuck yeah, let's go. Pakistan is like, fuck yeah, let's go.
All of these countries who are predominantly Muslim, who are mostly not white countries full of Muslim people, when they look at China's approach, they're like, not only was this effective, it's something we can learn from, and it is both an ethical and effective response to this problem that we too have been battling. The countries, though, that are like, China's being bad, are all Western, white, English-speaking mostly countries. I mean, some places in Western Europe.
The places where, like, every fucking time a New York Times opinion piece comes out in this era, we're in 2019.
Yes.
It's like, there is, in fact, a fundamental problem with Islam the Islamic world has to deal with.
Yeah, so it's wild when you look at this because China releases this statement. They're like, hey, we did this thing. We tried this cool thing. It's working really well. We're not getting these terrorist attacks anymore. Muslim countries, brown people in other countries around the world are like, fuck yeah, China's doing an awesome job. We're implementing some of these measures. We're learning from it. White people are like, I sense a political opportunity. We condemn it. So we're going to get into why the condemnation happened and what it turned out to. So on July 8th, 2019, a group of 22 countries issues a joint letter to the 41st session of the United Nations Human Rights Council accusing China of using these centers as mass internment camps for Uyghur Muslims. There's no evidence of this, I just want to say. These countries are, like I said, predominantly Western, English-speaking, or European countries. You know, white people in places without a lot of Muslim people there. And one report on this says most also were NATO members or held other security relationships with the United States.
Okay, I have a question.
Huh.
Could you draw the Prophet Muhammad? I'm just saying, because that is the real test.
That's the real test. So, 2019, these U.S. allies come forward and are like, not so fast, China. We think you're doing a genocide. Now, 4 days later, on July 12, 2019, 37 countries respond and issue a competing letter to the UN Human Rights Council that basically says, hey, this is not correct, and we support China's policies in the Xinjiang region. Then 13 more countries come on board and say we also support China's policies in the region. Predominantly Muslim brown countries. So this makes a total of 50 countries saying this is not correct what these U.S. allies are saying. We don't know why they're saying this, but China is doing a good thing here in Xinjiang. So again, mostly not white, mostly Muslim. And this means, just to summarize how we get to this point before we even get to the issue to talk about it specifically, since the 1990s, China has been engaged in counterterrorism efforts in Xinjiang against a very small number of internationally operating Islamic extremists who happen to be Uyghur, sure, who are looking to form a separatist movement in China, but also in 6 other nearby countries, and we're all engaging in terrorism across all 7 countries. China and the neighboring countries that were dealing with this very small, specific group of people, mostly Muslim countries, the ETIM is who they're dealing with, they have proof that their counterterrorism measures to fight this level of extremism are both justified, they had terrorist attacks, and also were effective, actually stopped these attacks from happening. The West, however, takes this as an opportunity to claim that these counterterrorism efforts constitute a human rights abuse of all Uyghurs in Xinjiang, and then seeks to politicize this issue, most likely because we realize a separatist movement in Xinjiang will benefit the United States by weakening China, who is our political enemy, and potentially opening the door for us to have increased access to their mining and oil.
Okay.
So this is where we get to this. Now, this is where a guy named Adrian Zenz enters the picture.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay.
Who's a real chill guy.
So he is the kookiest cuckoo ever cooked. I swear, this guy. Okay. So, again, we get to this point, it's kind of hard to talk to people about the Uyghur quote-unquote genocide. Like we said at the beginning of the episode, right? Nobody wants to be a genocide denier. You want to care about Muslim people. And that's why I tell people who are on the fence about this issue, look at the map of who supports China and who doesn't. When you stand with the narrative that China is committing genocide against Uyghur people, you are standing with white Western countries. You are not standing with Muslim people. Muslim people do not agree.
Listen, I'm just saying, we got to look at their financial records. Did any of these countries receive either a belt or a road?
Okay. Conflict of interest.
Conflict of interest.
So, on top of that, the way that I usually try to talk to liberals about this issue is to inform them that, hey, the Uyghur quote-unquote genocide is quite literally a Donald Trump conspiracy theory.
Who's the Mr. Mustache guy from Trump 1?
Mike Pompeo?
No, he was like the China pill, or the guy who was like, I fucking hate China. This is like, China's our big enemy. In any case.
I thought it was Mike Pompeo. Okay.
Okay.
So, and this is really what you have to understand about this. This idea that China is all of a sudden not doing normal counterterrorism measures that are a lot more humane than what the United States was doing, certainly against a group of people that the United States also identified as terrorists, as political enemies, and we just bombed the shit out of them, and China responded by opening up schools to try to prevent them from being
I mean, it really will tie
radicalized.
in on the business of black sites.
Yeah.
Like, I can imagine, like, if you are a private contractor and you have set up like a secret off the map facility somewhere in like the Caucasus region, perhaps.
And China is like, we're just going to prevent them from being radicalized.
You are being robbed of customers.
These are potential customers. That's true. And again, I just want to stress, ETIM, this group that China is targeting, the United States solution was to bomb ETIM. We bombed them aggressively. China is like, we're going to make it harder for them to recruit by just giving people good lives, which is the approach to crime we know works. Okay, so this whole idea is quite literally a Donald Trump conspiracy theory. And that brings us to 2021. So just before Donald Trump leaves office in his first term, his Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, releases a statement officially accusing China of committing genocide against the Uyghurs in Xinjiang. The report is super anti-communist, super Red Scare, and it says, quote, for the past 4 years, this administration has exposed the nature of the Chinese Communist Party and called it what it is, a Marxist-Leninist regime that exerts power over the long-suffering Chinese people through brainwashing and brute force. Now, this report goes on to say that these vocational centers, these adult colleges that China has introduced, are actually secret, yes, as David mentioned, concentration camps that are, doing a Holocaust against the Uyghur people. And along with this statement is released a report. The report comes from one man, Adrian Zenz. And he is the man from which the entire informational network about the supposed Uyghur genocide comes from. It all comes from this one man and this one report who was contracted by the Donald Trump administration to craft it. So Adrian Zenz makes a report, first of all, that goes along with his Mike Pompeo release. The report is literally based on him interviewing 8 people.
Mm-hmm.
He talks to 8 people. And
that is a representative sample size. And
of 21 million people.
You are not a demographer. You have no right to criticize this esteemed scholar's work.
Yeah, Adrian Zenz. Okay, we'll get into that. So Adrian Zenz talks to 8 people in China, in Xinjiang, and it's basically like, hey, these schools China's opened, do you like them? And 7 people are like, yeah, that's fine, they're fine. And one guy's like, not so much me.
All he wanted was a Pepsi.
So Adrian Zenz extrapolates mathematically and says that because close to 10% of the people he talked to felt oppressed by them, then probably 10% of all Uyghur Muslim people were being oppressed by the camps, and that constituted a genocide. And I shit you not, this is the report.
I gotta say, I am shocked that, maybe it's just because I'm an American, but if I asked 8 different people, hey, do you like school? Among my peer group, all 8 of them would have been like, nah, fuck that, fuck the system, man.
I know, it's pretty good. 7 people were like, actually, they're kind of, yeah, because this is not a full report, obviously, asking 8 people a question and then doing bad math from it, he has to pad the report. So literally all of the information that goes into pad the report comes from one source. If you had to guess what it is.
Radio Free Asia.
It is Radio Free Asia, yes. For those of you who don't know, we have an entire episode touching on Radio Free Asia. It is a propaganda network created by the CIA that is funded 100% from U.S. Congress and works in conjunction with our State Department. So this is all wild. The claim has now been perpetuated by a few key players, but it's worth noting, we think these are original sources. They are not. They are getting their information from this one Adrian Zenz report. But these key players to keep your eye on while we talk about this issue are the World Uyghur Congress, Campaign for Uyghurs, a person named Rushan Abbas, a person named Omar Kanat, a group called Chinese Human Rights Defenders, Radio Free Asia, of course, and Victims of Communism, which is another congressionally funded organization.
They're the 10 million victims of communism.
100 million.
Oh, it's,
Yes. So Victims of Communism, for those of you who don't know, we'll talk about them, but they are a bizarre group that has been debunked as being wildly anti-Semitic because they are constantly trying to prove 100 million people have died from communism. 100 million people have not died from communism.
But they include the Nazis.
They include dead Nazis from World War II because the USSR defeated Germany. Yes. And it is absolutely wild. And sometimes they try to build memorials to the victims of communism. And in Canada recently, the Canadian government had to put a stop to when they were trying to build because it turned out all the names listed on the memorial, a bunch of them were Nazis. So these are not very trustworthy sources. From there, media sources that we consider more mainstream have picked the story up and spread them without noting that these are all U.S. government-funded sources stemming from that one Adrian Zenz article from the Trump administration. And that is how these Trump-era anti-Chinese conspiracy theory claims have ended up being taken seriously by most people in the United States. So again, if you want to talk to a liberal about this, if you are a socialist, a person with left-wing values, and you want to talk to a liberal about the Uyghur quote-unquote genocide, the most important thing to tell them is that this is a racist conspiracy theory started by Donald Trump against Chinese people because he's weird about Asians. And that is 100% true. This is 100% what's happening here. Now,
And then you have to back it up with all sorts of
and
say,
now we
fuck
get
it.
into the details. Yes. So, the Mike Pompeo thing. Mike Pompeo was the person who released this press release on basically the final day of the Trump administration making this claim. If you don't know who Mike Pompeo is, he used to be the director of the CIA. And he himself has said, quote, "I was the CIA director. We lied, we cheated, we stole." He even goes on to say, "We taught classes on how to lie and cheat and steal when I worked for the CIA and the U.S. government."
I mean, that is
He is correct.
basically the job of a spy.
That is the job of a spy. So Mike Pompeo acknowledges directly that he himself is not a trustworthy source on this claim, right? He's like, I'll say anything for
No,
the government to
he's
tell
like,
that.
no, this is, he told you that he lied and he stole and whatever. So he is a trustworthy source. Look at that candor.
He is very honest about it. It's so true. Next is Adrian Zenz himself. So Adrian Zenz, it's worth noting, is a senior fellow at the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation. That thing we were just talking about that is congressionally funded, that always gets in trouble for calling dead Nazis victims of communism. It was actually created by a Nazi collaborator named Yaroslav Stetsko.
They just love statues.
So, Victims of Communism, not a reliable source. Adrian Zenz from Victims of Communism. Zenz himself is a right-wing homophobic religious extremist who claims that child abuse is great and that he was led by God to fight China.
Wait, back up.
Yeah. He's like,
Source, citation, please.
well, don't worry, because the source on this is his book, Worthy to Escape, Why All Believers Will Not Be Raptured Before the Tribulation.
Oh, he's a rapture guy. Oh, he's a left behind guy.
He is
That
behind God.
that rocks.
Yeah, his book is fascinating. The chapters are titled things like We Are the Bride, What It Means to Be Engaged to Jesus, Recovering End Times, Truth Throughout History, Pre-Tribulation versus Pre-Wrath, Part 1, Why There Will Be Two Raptures, Become an Overcomer, Focus on the Spirit, The Origin and Rise of the Antichrist, spoiler alert, he thinks it's loose women having too much sex.
That's not Peter Thiel?
No, sorry.
I will say,
It's women being slutty.
This is giving me extreme PTSD about my time at Fresno Christian.
Yes. See, it was relevant.
Yeah, no.
The private school thing, yeah. Chapter 12 of this book is called God's Wrath and the Fall of Babylon. So when we say this guy is a kook, this is what we're talking about. So he has all sorts of wild claims. He says child abuse is great. He says that he was personally led by God to fight against China. So he admits he's got a whole anti-China bias he's working with. He thinks that Satan created feminism. He obviously thinks true believers, gay people, obviously.
Broken clock, right twice.
David also believes Satan created feminism. He believes that anti-discrimination laws unfairly malign Christians, which is I think you're saying the quiet part out loud. I don't think you're supposed to say that.
What's the Nixon advisor who was we used to talk about segregation, but now we talk about tax law. This guy, he didn't get the memo.
He did not get the memo. And it's worth noting that Adrian Zenz was paid $625,000 by the Trump administration to create his report about the Uyghur quote-unquote genocide.
Listen, you've gotten a book advance. You know how this works.
You just say what they want you to say. So, Zenz then published a claim in this report saying that probably, if he had to guess, maybe 1.8 million Uyghurs were being detained in concentration camps. Again, based on interviewing 8 people and using...
one didn't like school.
Yes, and using information to back it up from Radio Free Asia, the propaganda wing created by the CIA to craft this story. Now, the 1.8 million number is important because there is no real number for how many people are supposedly in these things because he's just kind of making things up. So you will see different numbers be reported constantly. from the same people sometimes, and they will vacillate wildly from day to day. There is no real number because this is not a real thing. Now, the next person you will see talk about this kind of a lot is a group called World Uyghur Congress. Now, World Uyghur Congress has a person named Omer Kanat as the executive director. Omer Kanat, previous job, if you had to guess where he was working, where would you guess?
You know, I'm going to shake things up. State Department.
Not Radio Free Asia.
Damn.
Sorry, it's all Radio Free Asia. And if you had to guess who funds the World Uyghur Congress, who would you guess?
The Radio Free Asia.
National Endowment for Democracy.
God damn it.
Yes, this is the CIA's NGO. So Omer Kanat, who's the executive director at World Uyghur Congress, comes from a CIA propaganda outlet, and World Uyghur Congress itself is paid by a CIA NGO. Okay, so these are the types of people spreading this information. The next source you'll see talk about this issue is someone named Rushan Abbas, who comes from a group called the Campaign for Uyghurs. Now, Rushan Abbas doesn't just come from this group. She's the creator of Campaign for Uyghurs. This is her group she made. And she claims to be a survivor of the Chinese concentration camps in Xinjiang. However, her own resume on LinkedIn shows that since the early 2000s, she has been working with the U.S. government, including working at Guantanamo Bay.
Oh, that rocks. So she does know about concentration camps.
Because she worked at one for the U.S. government. And she has also worked for the U.S. Department of Defense.
Wait, do you think she knows Pete Hegseth?
Probably. And also, she worked at Radio Free Asia.
God forbid a woman have
Have hobbies. CIA disinformation and the State Department. Yes. So her foundation she started, Campaign for Uyghurs. David, if you had to guess who funds it,
is a National Endowment.
It is National Endowment for Democracy. But also, this is a fun little aside, they get some funding from Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation.
They're like a grant-based organization. I would love to be the grant writer. You come out, you have like your fucking, it's 2008, you come out of your liberal arts college with like a fucking degree in English, and you're like, oh man, I can't even get a job like waiting tables. I'll get like a certification in grant writing.
And then this is where you're like, there's a secret Holocaust happening in China that nobody's seen.
Please give us money.
Please give us hundreds of thousands of dollars, U.S. government. We hate communism. And then it's like, check, sold. Yeah. Okay. So the next source on this that we talked about was Chinese Human Rights Defenders. This is a group headquartered in Washington, D.C., funded entirely by U.S. government grants, including grants from...
Oh, God damn it. Madeline, don't make it. I'm getting bored. National Endowment
for Democracy from 2012 to 2016. Definitely, we have those documents available. The next source, obviously, is Radio Free Asia itself, which was, as we mentioned, created by the CIA in the 1950s, specifically to spread anti-communist propaganda about Asia. It was noted by the New York Times to be, quote, a worldwide propaganda network built by the CIA, part of that. And they are currently a part of the U.S. Agency for Global Media, which we've done a whole podcast episode about. It's one of my favorite podcast episodes we've done. That is the United States congressionally funded propaganda network. And they were the first people to release the estimates of numbers from Adrian Zenz about how many Uyghur Muslims were, quote unquote, detained. It is from them and the Adrian Zenz report that all information comes. Now, the last source I'm going to talk about is the only one I have found that is not directly affiliated with the U.S. government. And this is an interesting person.
And they are above reproach.
Honestly, I could see this going either way for this person. This person is a woman named Cyragul Sautbay, and she claims she was a teacher in one of these vocational centers. But she says there she witnessed abuses. The Chinese government is like, that woman was getting prosecuted for committing fraud, and she just concocted a fraudulent story to gain emergency asylum from the UN so she wouldn't be persecuted for her crimes here.
Prosecuted.
Sorry. And persecuted.
Prosecuted.
Prosecuted and persecuted.
I mean, okay, but like...
Prosecuted is the correct word, but
But, right, let's assume, I do not think because you were prosecuted in a country, I mean, you this is me coming out as pro-incarceration.
David says, bomb the Olympics. Satan created feminism. I love prisons.
I think that this podcast runs on tension.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think we could amplify that for sure. Yeah.
And
That's why David became a Republican after dating like 3 rich girls.
it's more than 3.
It is more than touche. It is more than 3.
But right, if you are going to be like the blue-haired leftist,
Which I am.
which I have to I can't be that.
No, you're right. So you have to be
But right, no, I mean like
Adrian Zen's his biggest fan.
no, I'm just saying, right, like in defense of China and the carceral state, to prosecute someone for their crimes is not persecuting them.
Okay, you're right. That's
Right,
true. That's
like-
true. That's fair. It's justified. It's a normal institutionalized thing. You're totally right. Okay. So she claims, she was like, oh, like I taught here and I saw all sorts of horrible things happen. China's like, she was literally in a bunch of legal trouble here. She very clearly saw what was happening and used it as an opportunity to try to seek asylum, to escape being held accountable for her crimes. And she's the only person, again, that we cannot directly link to the U.S. government. However, it is worth noting her stories are pretty inconsistent. She has some times she tells her story where she says she saw no violence or human rights abuses at all. Then she has other times she tells her story and she says she saw extreme, graphic, horrific violence.
Once her entire family had to survive off of rats and they were made the slaves of a mentally disabled family.
It is kind of Yeonmi Park
Yeah.
vibes. Yes, it is, totally. So I will say, you have to just use your best judgment. When you look at her stories, you can see they are very, very inconsistent. But this is the only person who's come forward as a consistent source on this. It is not like directly employed by or being funded by the U.S. government. Now, on top of these sources obviously being not very credible, right? We also have some people who are affiliated with the American government who are like, hey, this thing is not real, like straight up. Now, the first person who came forward and was like, hey, this is not real, I actually talked about this in the context of a whole bunch of stuff about the U.S. government. She divulged. She was basically a CIA interpreter who became a whistleblower. And she was very, very vocal about her experiences working as an interpreter and what she saw. And she was basically like, I saw the U.S. government doing a bunch of really unethical, shady things. And here's everything I saw, whistleblower, all sorts of topics. Now, this whole situation in Xinjiang with the Uyghurs and the vocational centers being represented as though they're concentration camps in some way, this is part of many things she talks about from her experience. But she basically says that, she watched the United States say they plan to destabilize Xinjiang by making it, quote, the next Taiwan. So this is what she had to say.
So she was like, oh, this is going to be, they call it a strategy of tension kind of thing where we...
Right.
Yeah.
We are going to try to stoke the separatist movement, try to convince everybody that this group should not be a part of China, that they don't want to be a part of China, and get everybody to think China's evil and bad. Another person who talks about this a little bit is Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson. And he actually has a very unique way he talked about this. He gave a talk and he basically said, I don't know, maybe talking about Uyghur unrest in Xinjiang could be a CIA narrative to destabilize China. Who knows? And then he's like, I didn't definitely say it was. So take that as you would like to. He did not definitely say it was, but it's also like, why did he say this? And he says this in a public address. It is quite weird to watch.
Listen, sometimes, like he's a colonel.
He's a colonel.
He's a colonel. So he had his military ambitions dashed. He did not make it to general.
Is that what comes after colonel?
I believe general is as high as you can get.
Okay,
But,
all right, okay. He's pretty high up, though.
But, right, and you're like, he went, as they say, off the reservation. Right, and he's like, listen, you guys aren't going to promote me. I am stuck at a dead-end job. Fuck this. I don't know. I will
say this. Yeah. Yes, I will say this. This man, I believe, is a libertarian. He gave this talk at a libertarian-sponsored event, and it was in the context of how egregious the U.S. military budget is and how we are constantly meddling in things we should not be meddling in.
I mean, this does feel very libertarian. Like,
yes.
The second you said libertarian, I was like,
That's his motivation here. So I would say that if this is actually real, and he was like, I can't say it is, so I'm going to tell you I didn't definitely say it. if this is a real thing he wants people to know about, but he feels he can't actually literally say it, his motivation would be political because it matches his political ambition to point out military waste and spending.
And he's also like, I'm just going to say, like, this is me being not just trying to be an asshole. The U.S. foreign policy apparatus is a giant cumbersome thing, and famously, not all the fucking parts talk to each other.
Correct.
Right.
And a lot of people hate the CIA. A lot of different organizations within the U.S. government's kind of framework do not like the CIA. And because the CIA messes up their operations all the time.
Yeah.
Now, the last kind of piece of this puzzle of people who actually work with the U.S. government who are like, this is a weird claim, is literally U.S. government lawyers who actually got really upset because they're like, we don't have enough evidence of this claim for you to be going around saying this to people. Like, this is like grossly irresponsible, basically. For you guys to be saying this, we cannot prove this.
Yeah.
So these are lawyers affiliated with you.
Please do not make us defend this fucking claim.
Exactly, because we cannot. Yes. So this is why also you might have noticed that when the story originally broke around 2021, they were calling it a genocide. And then by around 2022, 2023, the language has shifted to a cultural genocide, wherein the kind of way this was talked about was trying to say that China wasn't actually doing a genocide, fine, but they were trying to erase the culture of the Uyghur people by making it illegal to speak the language and destroying all of these mosques. And then, everybody was like, Xinjiang is a huge tourist destination. You can go there. You can see that, like, the street signs are written in Uyghur and the money has Uyghur in it. And everybody there is like, we learn Uyghur language in schools. This is not real or happening. And additionally, China has more mosques per capita for Muslim person in their population than the United States does. So, like, they have a ton of mosques, like, way more. Like, I think it's like 3 times as many as the United States does per Muslim person here. So all of this couldn't be claimed. So then they had to, like, shift the narrative, and they just kind of stopped talking about it altogether. Now, it's also worth noting that this came after a different attempt in 2019 to stoke a separatist movement in Xinjiang by talking about, I don't know if you remember this, David, Xinjiang cotton. Do you remember this? I remember this because of my job. So my job's in fashion. So in 2019-ish, a huge hubbub came out. Basically, the U.S. government was pushing a narrative that Xinjiang was using enslaved Uyghurs to handpick cotton in, like, human rights abuse situations.
So they were basically saying, like, Southern style chattel slavery
was happening,
is literally happening in a way that
Xinjiang,
especially to U.S. audiences, would immediately ring bells.
Yes. And this was a huge narrative in 2019 and 2020 and kind of had died out by 2021. But it was such a big deal that customers were literally calling on all clothing companies to boycott using cotton because most cotton comes from the Xinjiang province of China worldwide. So during this time, we were getting customers constantly at my work, because I'm a fashion designer, refusing to buy cotton, saying that if we sold cotton, we were complicit in slave labor of the Uyghur people. And basically, this one disappeared because a lot of Uyghur farmers came forward with videos that were like, why would we pick cotton by hand? This doesn't even make sense. We have these giant machines that do it. And they just showed these giant machines they used to, like, till their fields. And these Xinjiang farmers were like, this doesn't even economically make sense. Like, it's way harder to manage, like, 1,000 people hand-picking cotton in a field than to just use this machine that we all have on our farm. Like, no, this isn't real. And once those videos started to get released publicly, that's when that narrative kind of dropped. So in 2021, when this whole Uyghur genocide concentration camp thing happened, I was like, they're trying again. Because I had been dealing with the Xinjiang cotton thing for years as an apparel designer, right? So this was not the first attempt at this. Now, additionally, the skepticism for this claim comes from the lack of an ability to verify it, like the lawyers were saying. Now, the first thing that I kind of mentioned were that 1.8 million people figure, there is no consistent reporting on how many people this is supposedly affecting. And depending on who you talk to, it'll be anywhere from 1 million people to 6 million people. Like, the numbers fluctuate wildly, often from the same sources. So one of the sources I have here is this guy, CJ Whirlman, who's a journalist, quote unquote, who is one of the people who tries to push this narrative. This is like this very clickbait, funny compilation of some of his tweets that somebody made. But you can see he's, basically saying, like, from day to day on his own Twitter, he's like, 1.5 million Muslim Uyghurs are held in internment camps in Xinjiang. And then a couple days later, he's like, 3 million Uyghur Muslims are being held in concentration camps in Xinjiang. And then a few months after that, he's saying, like a year after that, he's saying 5 million Uyghur Muslims are being held in Xinjiang concentration camps. And then, but like a month before that, he said it was 6 million. It's like these numbers are like...
Listen, the news changes every day. That's why they call it news.
They're releasing millions of people every day. They're bringing millions of people in.
It's like a constant fluctuation in and out of the camps.
Yeah, apparently.
It might be like they go home at the end of the day sometimes.
Well,
like a school.
Funny you say this. So, the BBC tries to launch a surprise investigative visit to Xinjiang to one of these schools.
Camps.
To be like, we're checking out the concentration camps. And when you watch this video, which I cannot believe they released, honestly, if you watch this video, it is so uncomfortable to watch because you can tell they are desperately trying to make something look like it's happening there. It's not. In the video themselves, they are surprised to see a bunch of people leaving the camp. And they're like, where are you guys going? And they're like, it's like Friday at 6 p.m. We're going home for the weekend. Like, what do you mean, where are we going? And like the BBC seems shocked by this. Like they really expected these people to be held in concentration camps. And they're all like, yeah, we're getting on the school bus to go home.
So if I'm understanding correctly, it could be like a boarding school situation where it's like maybe you stay for the week and then you go home on the weekends.
Maybe, yes. But they're definitely going home for the weekends. And some of the schools definitely aren't doing that. Some people are like, yeah, it's just like an adult education school and then we go home afterwards. So this is like a really awkward video that you can watch of them trying to like prove something and they're like not able to, and it's very, very surreal and weird. Actually somebody wrote about it on, this is just like a person writing about it, but I've seen the actual video itself, and the video is linked in this article. So I'll put this in our sources, but it is just to a Medium article, which isn't super trustworthy, but the actual video is there. So you can watch the actual video. And it's pretty funny because they also like claim they like the big incendiary thing they find in this quote unquote camp is that they find like graffiti written in a bathroom wall that they're not able to show because it would be too incriminating.
This is like the October 7th footage that they're not able to show.
Because it's too brutal. It's too bad you won't like it. Yeah. So they claim that there's a graffiti on the bathroom wall that says, "Oh, my heart don't break." But they can't actually show it because it would put people in danger. And that is the most incendiary thing they're able to find in this entire video, which is very, very weird.
So someone writing bad poetry
on a wall in a bathroom that they can't even show us, so we don't even know if it's real. So that's the video of that. Okay. So the next thing that's like, this doesn't add up or make sense, is that there are claims that mosques are being destroyed all throughout China, right? And in Xinjiang. But it turned out that China was actually retrofitting ancient mosques for safety. And not just ancient mosques, like a bunch of ancient buildings. They like did this infrastructure project to like fix all, because it is a very old region. Remember, like 60 BC, like a lot of these mosques has been around for a really long time. And some of them were no longer safe to be entered. So they did have to tear down some parts of them. But that was like, not just mosques. That was like a bunch of old buildings throughout China. And still they have, it's not even over 3 times as many. It's 10 times as many mosques as the United States in general, and 3 times as many mosques per capita compared to American Muslims. So it's like this weird thing where they like selectively took pictures of like mosques that were in a state of disrepair that were not safe to be inhabited anymore because they were like from 60 BC. And
okay, Madeline, you have to remember when Islam was, just think about this rationally.
Yeah.
Was Islam created before Christianity?
No, it wasn't. Obviously, it wasn't. But the buildings were really
yes,
old. So a lot of the buildings get reappropriated. You know? Like there was one building in particular. Like a lot of these buildings have multiple different eras throughout them. So it's not like they were mosques when they started.
Yeah. Because I was like,
obviously, religious buildings change hand all the time, and that's why, like, too, when you travel, you will often see buildings that started out as churches that became mosques that changed. Yeah.
Hagia Sophia or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. So a lot of these buildings change hands. So actually there was like one in particular where they showed that this complex had multiple different buildings that were part built it multiple different times. It had started as like a church, it had like, or like a temple, and it had become like a mosque later. And because the buildings were built at different times, they ended up having to tear down like one of the buildings, but not the other ones. So there was like this was like one of the most incendiary ones. They're destroying this old blah, blah, blah. And really they were destroying something that had become like a carriage house in recent years. It had originally been like a religious building, but it wasn't like the mosque. The mosque part had been built after, like all of it's just like very like misrepresented, like misreporting, and the actual like part that was used for religious services was still working.
I just gotta, like, not that it matters. Coming from a country that has historically been really happy to destroy religious monuments and places, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Like, that has been, or has facilitated, for example, the plunder of countries we've invaded's national treasures. Seems real rich.
Yeah, it's real rich coming from us for sure. But yeah, you were right to point out, like, obviously, yeah, the building, which actually is a point too, where it's like these buildings didn't even start out as mosques, a lot of them. They're just like really freaking old buildings because China's really old. And a lot of these buildings are repurposed, reappropriated, reused for multiple different
I'm no expert on Islam, but I do know that one of the core tenets of Islam is that you have to be in an unsafe building to practice it.
You've got to be in a real old building that might fall on you, yeah. So that came out, and all these people were like, hey, that building's still, like, that mosque is still there. I go to it all the time. They just tore down this, like, really old building. But that was, like, a part of the complex or whatever. So there's also the claims, obviously, that the Uyghur language was being banned. Obviously, that's very easy to debunk because, again, Xinjiang is a major tourist destination. Like, millions of people visit Xinjiang every single year for vacation. You can just look at the local currency. It has the Uyghur language on it. You can look at the street signs. It has the Uyghur language on it. So
no, I will say, one of the sources that I found when I was, like, looking at sort of, like, what Uyghur nationalism looks like is, like, every source would do this, like, really weird thing where it would be like, listen, the official Chinese policy is pluralism about cultural practices, including language. However, and then they would be like, unofficial, and then they would get real wishy-washy and vague and be like, unofficial practices seem to suggest that there is a hegemonic practice of speaking like Han Chinese or like Mandarin Chinese in Xinjiang. And then it would be like, okay, where's your fucking evidence? And it would just be like,
none.
Yeah.
Right. So there was also like a lot of the quote unquote evidence you will see on the internet is like absolutely audacious how ridiculous it is. So there was one video that was circulating the internet for a while that claimed to be of a Chinese soldier beating a Uyghur Muslim for having a copy of the Quran. This was actually, though, a video from a 2017 kind of incident where an Indonesian soldier was beating up a thief. So that
entirely different country.
Entirely different country, entirely different era, entirely different situation. And somebody just took it and was like, brown people are involved. This is a Uyghur Muslim getting beaten by a Chinese soldier for having a copy of the Quran. And people from like Indonesia, for example, were like, that's us. No, that's not you.
A crazy, just
okay.
Okay.
This is what I mean, where you start to get mad because you're like, they didn't even try. Like, this is the laziest attempt to spread disinformation I've ever seen. And this so lazy, in fact, that when you think about disinformation and propaganda campaigns of the past, you wonder how easy in the moment then they were to debunk as well. Like, how ridiculous were they? And you just, like, keep repeating the lie until it becomes real, right? So there's also something that was released that was said to be photos of Uyghur Muslims in detention camps. Well, it turned out to actually be photos from a protest that happened in Istanbul in 2018, mixed with photos that were taken of a migrant shelter in Thailand in 2014. Not the same nationality of people, not the same era.
This is what I'm saying. The racism is getting real.
Yes.
Like, where it's like, okay, you took a Thailand photo and a Turkey photo,
yes,
and you called it China.
Yep.
Yep.
So then there was a video that circulated the internet where people claimed that this was a Chinese police officer strangling a Uyghur woman. It turned out to actually be a Chinese police officer, but he was restraining an aggressive drunk woman in Shenzhen, which is not anywhere near Xinjiang. And the woman was just intoxicated and, like, flailing and being aggressive.
Madeline is in favor of police brutality.
Yes, and I say beat the drunk women.
Madeline has gone militant straight edge.
Hate edge. She was drinking alcohol. take her out back.
She's
and
joined
feed her with a
FSU.
bat. Yeah. Okay. So then a photo circulated the internet that claimed to be of Uyghur Muslims doing forced labor in factories. It turned out to be photos of just like a regular factory in a Spanish-speaking country because all the signage on the walls was written in Spanish. And it's not even, I'm going to show you.
Wait, hold on.
This is the news story written by somebody named Jack Kelly, right? And this photo, he says, is from Getty Images, and he's talking about human rights violations. China moves Uyghur Muslims into forced labor factories. Here's the photo. When you look at the photo, all the signs are in Spanish.
Well, can you imagine? That is linguistic terrorism to the Uyghur people, because
That's part of the genocide, yeah.
Can you imagine if you are Uyghur and you are already having your language taken from you in favor of Mandarin Chinese?
And now you're forced to read signs in Spanish?
And then they just hang signs in Spanish and they're like, fucking deal with it?
Yeah, I mean, it's wild, though. Again, when you talk about the racism, it's like, these are just random brown people.
Yeah.
You know, there's like every random brown person could be Uyghur. Fuck it, why not? All right. Next is a video claiming to be of the Chinese government persecuting a Uyghur Muslim in a torture camp. This one is the wildest one. It turned out to be photos from a BDSM fetish club in Taiwan. Do you want to see this one?
Do I want to see this one?
It's not that bad. It's not that explicit.
Okay.
It's a video here. You can see.
Uh-huh.
I won't play the video, but it's a person like basically on like a fetish spit roast kind of thing.
It's not the what's the X one?
No. This is like where you're getting spun around in circles and they have like a ball gag in their mouth. And it is literally from a sex club in Thailand. Or is it Thailand or Taiwan? Taiwan.
I gotta this feels like it's like the CIA or like the American propaganda apparatus has really fallen prey to like internet slop.
I mean, but this is what I mean, where it's like, first of all, when you actually look into this, it is infuriating because you're like, this cannot be everything. This cannot be where this is coming from.
I feel like this is at a certain point they're going to do like the AI images thing and they're going to be like, show me a Uyghur being spit roasted with a ball gag.
Yeah.
So
Yes. So, I mean, it's really upsetting, but then it makes you think, like, how ridiculous was all the info being pushed for all these other conspiracy theories that the CIA was pushing in the past? Like, when you look at just Adrian Zanz, you're like, this man is not a trustworthy source on anything. And then you look at, like, he's citing Radio Free Asia. We know that was created by the CIA. You look at all the people who are the regular cast of characters that are interviewed for this stuff, and you're like, you literally worked for the State Department at Guantanamo Bay. Like, they're not even trying to cover their tracks, and it's infuriating.
No, I'm going to say, this is my MAGA moment. I feel like we need to make the CIA great again, because in the era of James Jesus Angleton, after 5 martinis before noon, right, that motherfucker would have like a homophobic panic attack and then send a bunch of people into Albania to die. And we never knew a fucking thing about it.
No.
Right,
No, we get to see, I mean, and all it takes is like 10 minutes and you can see all the failures of the CIA on display now. Okay, this is another one. This one is titled, this was from Twitter, China fascist kill Muslim Uyghur in East Turkestan. And they're calling it East Turkestan, right? So that's how you know. It's like East Turkestan is a thing that like 200 extremists invented. Here's the picture. Here's the uncensored picture. It appears to be bottles of wine or some sort of sauce that have fallen off of a truck in boxes and broken. But they censor in the first version of it all of the boxes, which are kind of brown color. They could kind of be skin color. And all you see is red liquid on the ground. So it looks like maybe they're dead bodies. But it's just like Twitter slop, and this was passed around Twitter.
No, this is what I'm saying. We are in the era of like AI slop propaganda.
Yes,
and I don't like it.
This is how the propaganda works. It's like Facebook, Twitter slop, and it's just disinformation slop. Okay, so here's another disinformation slop. This one's from CNN. Uyghur victim reveals horrific torture in detention camp. This is not a detention camp. This is a junior high school.
Some would say that is a torture camp.
Yeah. This is a junior high. Okay. Here's another one. Reports online inaccurately stated that the UN found massive internment camps for Uyghur Muslims in Xinjiang. This was false. They actually went, the UN went, and it's kind of funny. Donald Trump actually was like, you don't need to go check it out. To the UN was like, no. But it was like, if you go, it's like you're normalizing it. So maybe don't go.
He's so good.
He's so fucking ridiculous. So basically, Donald Trump tried to discourage the UN from looking into it. They're like, there's definitely concentration camps. Don't go look for them. And the UN was like, we're going to go. They sent a small delegation out there. The delegation is like, there's no concentration camps here. But one person in the delegation was like, well, you could say this is a human rights abuse because the people of Xinjiang are being targeted with these policies for religious extremism because they are Muslim, because of Islam. And it is a unique reaction specifically to them and to Islam. So that does constitute repression of their religious freedom. So that's technically a human rights abuse.
I understand what they're saying.
Yes.
And that, right. And like if you adopt like an extremely, generalized liberal pluralist outlook in which everyone needs to be treated the same from like a Rawlsian from the behind the blind kind of thing, where it's like, no, you can't make any special accommodations for any special group kind of thing.
Yeah.
Sure.
It is technically correct. So when you hear people say that the UN found evidence of human rights abuses in Xinjiang, that is what they were talking about. What they were talking about is that following the religious extremism, China did implement more specific rules in Xinjiang about, you know how you're not allowed to proselytize your religion? They're like more outward displays of your religion were curbed. That was made even more illegal. But again, this is a policy that's been enacted against every single religious group all throughout China. You're not allowed to try to preach or position or push your religion on people. And they did crack down on it a little more in Xinjiang. That is true following the terrorism. So that technically is, according to the UN Charter, could classify as a human rights abuse because it specifically targets religious expression.
Yeah.
That is the thing. When people say they found evidence of human rights abuses, that's what they're talking about. That's it. That's the only thing. So this is why. So when we talk about also like how pathetic the US's attempt was at this, it's worth noting Donald Trump first delisted ETIM, the East Turkestan Islamic Movement, from the list of terrorist organizations immediately before collaborating with Adrian Zenz to release a report declaring the Uyghurs an oppressed ethnic minority in China due to China's restrictions on ETIM.
Mm-hmm.
So first he delisted them as a terrorist group. Remember, everybody in the United States had been like, this is a terrorist group. We bombed them because we were like, this is a terrorist group. And Donald Trump was like, it's not anymore. And then immediately released a report afterwards being like, oh my God, they're just like poor innocent Muslims being harmed by China. That's so crazy and bad, isn't it? Oh, Marxism's evil. So that happened. So that's pretty wild. The thing we talked about, obviously, the United States trying to discourage the UN from investigating Xinjiang. It's so horrible. Don't look, though, because then it's like you're normalizing it.
Well, look, we're leaving the UN anyway.
Are we leaving?
No. I mean, Donald Trump is always like, we should leave the UN. Fuck the UN.
Oh, yeah, because they go try to investigate stuff sometimes. I mean, but it's like, wow, because the UN's like our little buddy.
Yeah, but it's like sometimes the South Africa files criminal charges against Israel, and it's a whole thing.
That's so true. The Israel thing's really pushing the UN a little bit,
Yeah.
So also worth noting, in 2022, the America Competes Act was passed, which allocated $500 million a year for media outlets to produce journalism critical of China. That seems relevant here. And the National Endowment for Democracy has contributed a total of nearly $9 million to Uyghur separatist groups for disinformation and misinformation campaigns.
9 million?
Yes. Propaganda is cheap. Propaganda is cheap.
That is.
Propaganda is cheap. So where this gets us today is that you have basically a bunch of white people in the United States who believe that a genocide is occurring in Xinjiang against the Uyghur people. You have a bunch of Muslim countries that are like, there's absolutely no genocide occurring against them. China just introduced like colleges to try to fight terrorism, and a bunch of Western white countries who don't even understand where these claims stem from, which is this actually very real multi-country kind of movement that was a small group of separatists who were enacting terrorism. So most Americans don't know that. So what we started to see is that Uyghurs in China are starting to basically roast Americans and people in the West relentlessly for perpetuating this myth. And this has led to some very entertaining internet content that I know you're not aware of, David. So not all of it's internet content, but like, for example, a group of young Uyghurs tried to sue an Australian think tank over spreading misinformation about a quote-unquote Uyghur genocide. So they're actually pursuing this in court.
Okay.
In the Australian Parliament brought to a vote should they do like sanctions or embargoes basically against China because of this. And multiple source documents were kind of put forward. They're like, hey, this is not a real claim. This comes from this American kook named Adrian Zenz, who's like not trustworthy or credible. Like, there's no evidence of this whatsoever. We literally cannot embargo them based on this. There's also people like this woman named Gu Li, who is a travel vlogger from Xinjiang, who posts content in Xinjiang. And when this story broke out, she actually made a lot of content where she was like, hey, I'm like a Uyghur Muslim in China, in Xinjiang. This is not real. And she actually talks about how YouTube suppressed all of that content and took that content down and sometimes said it was like content violations and like she couldn't say that kind of stuff and was only allowed to post regular travel vlog content. There's also a person named Li Xinjiang, who's like kind of a YouTuber reporter personality, and she is a Uyghur Muslim in Xinjiang, and she actually posts videos talking about how like this is very obviously an American attempt to stoke a separatist movement in Xinjiang, and she explains why, and she breaks it all down, and she does like political kind of social media stuff. There's also a man who kind of goes viral a lot. His name is unfortunately Lucifer if you're an American, but it's like a traditional Uyghur name. It's Lucifer, and he posts a lot on the Chinese version of TikTok, which is called Red Note, and his videos go viral and get reposted lots of places. But he basically does the equivalent of Omegle, where he talks to people as a Uyghur Muslim man. And whenever he talks to like Westerners, he'll post the videos online and he'll literally try to like de-propagandize them. He'll be like, I am a Uyghur Muslim man in China. Like, none of this stuff is real. And he'll try to talk to people and break them down. And a lot of really interesting content comes out from this.
How many sources are you claiming there? Is that 8 sources?
What do you mean?
I'm just saying, you've got 8 people. 8 people, Madeline.
No, I mean, okay, there's also tourists who go to Xinjiang all the time and will post videos. There's actually like one really funny video of a guy who's like a Western tourist in Xinjiang, and he actually films himself trying to ask a Uyghur man about the concentration camps, and the Uyghur guy is just like, what? Like, what? I'm sorry, what are you talking about? Like, they literally have no clue.
He probably asked in Spanish.
And one of my favorite videos on the internet is of a group of really hot Uyghur Muslim girls out at dinner in Xinjiang, and they post this video absolutely roasting Americans. They're like, oh, since Americans suddenly decided they care about Muslims and they care about Chinese people so much, oh no, the big bad CCP took all of our money and we can't afford our dinner, you better cash app us. And they're like making fun of everybody. And one of the biggest kind of narratives that a lot of people have started to realize, even in the West, is like, wait a minute, the United States government doesn't care about Muslim people. The United States government doesn't care about Chinese people. Mm-hmm. Why all of a sudden are we supposed to believe that the United States cares about Muslim Chinese people?
I mean, it's like it's a double negative, obviously.
Yes.
So we don't care about Muslims. We don't care about the Chinese, but we do care about Muslim Chinese, right? Two negatives make a positive, as
apparently according to the U.S. government. So, okay, this is everything that I've kind of got about this story.
I mean, so the one thing I will say is that, right, like the Uyghur genocide as like a narrative is relatively recent, but as far back at least as 2008, as I told you when you proposed this topic, I was hearing aggressively from an old professor of mine that Uyghurs were discriminated against in Xinjiang province. And so this is a longer narrative. That was 2007, 2008.
Right.
I will say that man was avowedly an ex-CIA translator.
Okay, so but I mean, again, that's why, like, when I remember the cotton story, I'm like, they have been trying to cook up something to stoke this kind of separatist idea in Xinjiang for a very, very long time. Like, it seems like they're trying to land something in that region, and when that one CIA kind of translator became a whistleblower and was like, yeah, they're trying to make it the next Taiwan, that really made sense to me. It's like our government is constantly trying to convince us that these 5 autonomous regions of China are being oppressed by China, don't want to be a part of China, etc. And the truth is, like, yeah, there are some people there who probably don't want to be a part of China, just like there are some people in California who want to secede from the rest of the nation.
Those people are fucking seriously kooks.
I also, as a Californian, I think they are seriously kooks.
Like,
Yes.
I don't like our country, but
That makes no sense.
that makes no fucking
It
sense.
makes no sense. So, and this is really interesting. And it's like we find these tension points and we try to exploit that. I think the thing that is really unique about quote unquote the Uyghur genocide is how flimsy the claim even is, how easily debunked it is, how obviously, like, just crummy the quote unquote evidence that's presented is, the narrative, just how much it is like Twitter, Facebook slop that people are getting this from. The Adrian Zenz thing where it's like, did you guys even look into this guy? The fact that it's very obviously like a Donald Trump weird racist conspiracy theory he's trying to push for a political agenda. Like, this is the stuff that's shocking. And like, when I started to do the research on this subject, I really thought the propaganda was going to be better. And when I saw how bad and sloppy and just like sloppy in the sense of like internet slop,
Yeah.
the quote unquote evidence of this claim was, it was like almost embarrassing. Like, I got secondhand embarrassment. Like, it's so upsetting where you're like, this is where this comes from?
We used to be a great nation.
We used to have better propaganda. Maybe we never did though.
Remember
maybe all the propaganda.
have you seen, I can't remember the name of it, but they're like, I don't know the like Velvet Revolution documentary, or like the one about like the Estonian folk festival.
Yes.
Right, where like, and everyone's got like corny 80s like Eastern Bloc mullets, and they're like doing like Estonian folk songs.
Yes. And then,
I'm just
yeah. I mean, it's very, very fascinating. I think like the most interesting thing is that liberals in particular are very easy to propagandize if you use the right words and if you appeal to like the moral sensibility. Like, how do you convince a group of liberals to side with Donald Trump and a right-wing religious extremist who hates gay people and feminism and thinks you should beat children, and making up weird racist claims to discredit and debunk a group of Muslim people in China? Like, that should be everything liberals stand against. If you were like an American liberal, you should be like, I hate Donald Trump. I like identity politics.
I have a pussy hat.
I have a pink pussy hat. I don't think you should beat children, and I love gay people. How did we convince that specific group to latch onto this?
We called it a genocide.
We called it a genocide. That's it. We called it a genocide, and we hoped people wouldn't look into it too much because nobody wants to be the person who says a genocide isn't happening.
Yeah.
It's really, very interesting. I don't know. What do you think about this, David? What are your final thoughts?
I mean, as a general, like, right, I tend to push back, as I think or at some point while we were starting or talking about this, it was like, there is like this sort of like general Weberian way that people tend to talk about stuff like this, where it's like ideology determines material conditions. And whenever we talk about the CIA or like the deep state, so to speak,
yeah,
I always have this moment where I'm sort of like, that is kind of like, this seems like deeply ineffective for China. Like, from what I understand of like your average everyday Chinese person, right? They're like, they don't give a shit that this is like, that we're being told this dumb bullshit.
I mean, I will say young Uyghurs with internet access are starting to get mad about it.
Like, get mad at us.
Yeah, they're mad at us.
No, but like,
yeah.
they're not like...
They're very mad at the United States and at Americans, and not just us, like Europeans as well.
Yeah.
White Europeans. They're just like, what the fuck are you guys doing? And like, you'll see this as a trend. They're starting to get really, really mad at Americans. And like they have VPNs. They're starting to go on American social media networks. A bunch of Americans went to Chinese social media networks like RedNote and started talking to Chinese people, and they're just like, what the fuck are you saying?
No, I mean, I guess like my worry is that we like, if you are a person of a Marxist persuasion,
yes,
it can sometimes be easy to sort of look at the broad sweep of history since the founding of the CIA and the immediate aftermath of World War II as a kind of deus ex machina for the failures of socialism internationally. Does that make sense?
It does.
And right, so like the CIA is like they are 5 martini brunch, like gay panic weirdos who are like, bumbling their way through propaganda schemes.
And that's the thing that's wild. It's like sometimes the CIA stories are the most ridiculous, laughable comedy of errors you've ever witnessed.
Mhm.
But sometimes they're effective and they hit and they destabilize entire regions and they lead
Yeah.
to regime changes and coups that end up murdering millions of people.
Which is, I guess, so that's my point. Like, the CIA has undoubtedly been effective, and U.S. foreign policy and like anti-communist whatever ways has undoubtedly been effective in a lot of different ways. But I think, right, like the caution is always to be like, let's not treat them as like the single, or treat that as the single lever of power for the failures of international socialist movements. Does that make sense?
I mean, yeah, but I think downplaying its significance would be...
No, I'm not saying downplay. I think we just did 2.5 hours.
Yeah. But
So-
I think the thing that's important to take from this is that like you must remember the counter-revolution is constant.
Yeah.
And you must always be fighting against the counter-revolutionary narratives. I mean, I feel like the thing about like this whole Xinjiang wild situation is like, look, I'm sure there has been some discrimination against ethnic minority groups
Mhm.
in China, just like, or religious minority groups in China, just like there's probably discrimination against minority groups all throughout the world. Like,
And
I'm
it's
not saying that there's no way that there hasn't been experiences of discrimination, but to take those incidents of discrimination that probably have occurred and like to morph them into like a genocide is like such a huge stretch.
Yeah.
They-
No,
I-
yeah, no, I mean, that's like obvious. I always, one of the things I always think about is like the old ideological and ethnic problems don't go away because a country becomes socialist.
Exactly.
Right? Like,
Still
it's,
dealing with the
like,
same issues.
and you
yes.
know, like you see that in the Soviet Union, where it's like, okay, like
the woman question,
Yeah.
for example, or yeah,
or the fact that like large parts of the Eastern Bloc look suspiciously similar to large parts of the Russian Empire at the end of the 19th century, and like which means that the ethnic tensions, for example, in the Caucasus region, mirror a lot of the tensions, like right, of the like Soviet or the Russian Empire, right? So it's just like, okay, I always just, if you're a it's like take a materialist approach,
right.
right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes total sense. Again, I think like I don't know. I think that to me, this story should be a cautionary tale about, number one, just how willfully stupid the American public is. Like, just because you hear a narrative repeated over and over again. This is actually from the Australian document submitted to Parliament that I always recommend people start with because it's kind of funny. They have a line in it that's like, if you repeat a lie enough, it becomes the truth. Just because you hear people saying the same thing over and over again does not mean that it is real. And you need to really look at these things. And the ultimate irony is that you only need to look at them usually for a few minutes to be like, oh, this is wild. Like, you didn't even find people to pay to spread these stories who didn't have Guantanamo Bay on their fucking LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like offensive. Like, that's how stupid that we are. They're like, we don't need to. Nobody's going to look at that.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to look at this chick's LinkedIn and see she worked for the Defense Department in Guantanamo Bay. We'll just say that those years she was actually in Xinjiang teaching at this.
She's gonna, I mean, like, you gotta put that stuff on the TikTok. Wait, no, but TikTok, you said TikTok is, what's the shop? It's the shopping network now?
Oh my God, TikTok's become like QVC with TikTok shop.
But, right, like, I mean, I guess the other thing is, like, wow, Americans really are dumb.
We are dumb. We are so dumb. It's not even hard to fool us. And that's what's like the most shocking thing. So again, when I first heard the story, I was like, oh, this is very obviously like fake, like Adrian Zanz is not credible, Radio Free Asia, blah, 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 blah. But when I looked at the actual evidence, quote unquote evidence that was being supplied as quote unquote proof of this, it was depressing how bad it was. I expected them to try more.
I had like I've been just bopping around in an offline style way for a while. I haven't been, and I like, you know, went on the internet recently, and I was struck by how gibberish everything feels.
Yes.
In this way where I was just like, the people are saying words that literally do not make sense. Like, where it's like, this is a grammatical sentence, right? Like, it has the structure of something that has meaning, but when you actually try to parse what it could mean,
it's meaningless.
it's meaningless. And so much and it feels like a lot of this where it's like the photograph where it's like a bunch of boxes of wine or ketchup or whatever, right? Where it's like, this is literally meaningless. Like, you censored the focal point of the thing that we're supposed to be looking at.
Yeah.
Right. And then you were like, this is a dead body.
Well, yeah, and I mean that's true. I encounter the same thing. Like a lot of people just I notice this online a lot. A lot of people say gibberish and they don't understand it's gibberish, and then other people pretend to agree with it because they think it sounds smart.
This is also how I feel about Deleuze and Guattari, by the way. But that's a
This
different.
is how I feel about a lot of books.
I will get.
This is how I feel. Actually, you know who I feel this way about is Slavoj Žižek.
Yeah.
I'm like, when you actually look at what this guy is saying, I'm like only like a quarter of this is actually like legible. Like
the funny thing is, like, people who and the same with Deleuze and Guattari, a lot of people who I really respect are like will cite Deleuze and Guattari or Zizek. And I'm always just like,
well, the Zizek thing was wild because I was always like, okay, look, I know I'm not a stupid person. I know that I am literate. I know I'm functionally literate at a higher level than the average American, certainly. So when I was reading Zizek, I was like, this, like, my guy's just saying words. Like, this is not like a comprehensible, like, thought.
Wait, we should get you canceled for ableism.
Oh my God.
Madeline did ableism against Slavoj Žižek.
I'm just saying, it doesn't make sense. And then you read his writing, and I'm like, you're contradicting yourself, my guy. Like, you're contradicting.
No, but that's
you just said in something else.
That's the point of the dialectic.
Yeah, he's doing a dialectic with himself. Yeah.
Yeah.
Unintentionally. But yeah, finally one day I saw somebody on the internet be like, we all know this guy's just rambling, right? And I was like, thank you.
No, but so he is the Perverse Guide to Cinema or whatever. It's like who's the like British like documentary essayist guy who writes the propaganda, like the Freud propaganda guy.
I don't know.
Or whatever. It's where it's like got like a lot of Radiohead and Aphex Twin samples in it. Which I don't know, but where it's like when you start paying attention, you're like, this is stupid and bad and annoying, but it has the aesthetics of something meaningful.
It does. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
It has the aesthetics. That's Zizek. And like, it's like if you had a friend who like read a quarter of like 6 philosophy books and then got really stoned at a party and wanted to talk to you. Have you been this person?
No, I've met this person.
You've met this person.
A lot.
This is the vibe I get, exactly. But yeah, I guess I expected that level, like a Zizek level of like, this doesn't make sense. Not like a cartoonish Facebook of like Donald Trump ad style level of misinformation.
I mean, it is, the world is becoming ad busters.
Yeah.
On that note.
Okay, that's it. That's the episode. Thanks everybody for sticking around for our controversial episode. If you would like to hear more of our candid and controversial thoughts, you can find us over on Patreon, patreon.com/pickmeupi'mscared. We have a number of bonus episodes over there, and we will probably be posting another one up this week.
And that's where Madeline does all the racism.
That's right. To all the secret racism nobody can ever find. Pay $3 and you'll hear it yourself.
Yeah, but you have to pay an extra subscriber fee if you want to record it and retweet it.
And cancel me. Yeah. There's a secret cancel Madeline racism and ableism.
Yeah.
And ableism fee. That's
Madeline
so
did
true.
ableism against Slavoj Žižek, who's reading in LA coming up at like the Wiltern or something.
Oh no.
I want to go, so
no.
Can I go?
Maybe.
Okay.
Bonus episode. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for being here.